Well, this is your lucky night. I'm George Lund. I'm taking over for Chris, and we're going to see how things go. We're going to make one little change on your meeting agenda for Tuesday, May 10th, 2022, and that is C and D on your list down here are going to be switched. So we're going to go with D first and then C. That's the only change that we've made so far.
And Mr. Chair,
Yes.
Hey, Leipzig, staff has a brief statement they would like to read concerning the Zoom procedures. If you're okay, well,
That's
proceed
okay.
with that.
Yes, go ahead.
This meeting is now being recorded. Please silence all electronic devices. Please note, this meeting is being held in the board hearing room and the commissioners are attending in person. There is also an option for virtual attendance on Zoom webinar. If you are using Zoom, you may participate in the meeting using your computer, phone, or other electronic device. Zoom participants' chat will be disabled once the meeting begins. If you have trouble with Zoom, please call 913-715-1700. If you would like to speak, please use the raise hand function in the Zoom app to notify planning staff of your desire to speak. To activate this function, click Raise Hand in the webinar controls at the bottom of the screen. By phone, you may raise your hand by dialing *9. Please do not utilize the Raise Your Hand function until the start of the agenda item on which you desire to comment. We will take comments from in-person attendees first, followed by Zoom participants. The Zoom moderator will call on individuals who have raised their hand. The chairman may modify these procedures as needed to conduct an orderly and efficient meeting. All speakers will be limited to 3 minutes unless the chair designates a different time period in order to accommodate all the speakers desiring to speak. When your name is called by the moderator, your microphone will be unmuted. Please state your name and address for the record, followed by your comments. If you share concerns, comments, or points made by others, please refrain from repeating those comments and instead note for the record that you agree with the previous individual's comments. There will be a 10-second remaining warning sound. For board members and presenters, please state your name every time you begin talking so the notes can be transcribed for the record. This is a public meeting. We are presenting live and recording this meeting. Thank you.
Okay, we can proceed. First item is call to order and roll call.
Michael Levin,
Here.
George Lund,
Here.
Dave Johns.
Here.
Lindsay Grisay is not here. Mark Huggins is not present. James Neese.
Present.
Kelly Rass. Present. Randy Downing.
Here.
Randy Hutchins. Is he present on Zoom? All right, he's absent. Chris Iliff on Zoom? No, absent. And Roger Mason?
Here.
Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, Terry Atwell. Here. Thank you.
Okay. Jay, did you want to make a statement now or later?
Sorry. Good evening, good afternoon, Jay Leipzig Planning Department. Just for the record, we do have a quorum for the proceedings this evening. A couple of things that I wanted to mention before we get started. Potentially, this could be a long meeting. We are planning on having breaks every hour. The first break will be at 7 o'clock. And then if we need one before then, we can adjust accordingly, but our thought is we would have one at 7, one at 8, and 9, and so on, for wherever the meeting is as this evening proceeds. With that, Mr. Chair, just my introductory comments. I'll turn it over to you to talk about any disclosures of conflict of interest or ex parte communications.
Okay, the next item is disclosure of conflict of interest ex parte communications by members.
Mr. Chairman, Jim Neese, I would like to note for the record that after the public hearing, I had a short comment with 2 of the county commissioners. At some point in time, I called and asked a question of David Nopik, who's the Community Development Director in Gardner, and I called Ms. Crow, who is I think she's developer of Edgerton. Other than my wife, that's it.
That's it? All right. Any questions about that? Anyone else? Well, then we could move on to the public comment.
Mr. Chairman, Jay
Yes.
Leipzig, one more comment. I just wanted to make sure to have a quick, brief conversation with our chief legal counsel. Is that, or do we need to go through individually, or can we just do that if asked when anyone has any?
I
comment
think
on
the
that.
question needs to be asked, does anyone want to report a conflict of interest? Because we have had information on one particular member, and I just want to, for the record, to ensure I understand correctly their position if they feel they have a conflict. I guess that person is not going to say they have a conflict. So moving on.
All right, no comment. We shall move on. We'll move to public comment.
And Mr. Chairman, Jay Leipzig, if any members of the public would like to speak, may do so at this point and just come up to the dais, and you'll be given 3 minutes to speak. So we just stated we're doing in-person comments first, and then we'll do the Zoom comments following the in-person.
And Mr. Chair, this is Sean Penley, planning staff. I believe we do have a sign-in sheet too. We could start with that, and then, do you have this public sign-in sheet?
I have this visitor sign-in sheet.
Yes, yeah, those would be those public members who've signed up first. We could go in order of the sign-in sheet and then proceed with anyone else who would request to speak in person.
Mr. Chairman, I've got a quick question. If somebody's given a public comment, is it inappropriate for us to ask a question of that person?
Mr. Nee or Commissioner Neese, Jay Leipzig, I believe that the standard protocol is to not respond during the public comment. But then if there are additional questions that commissioners wish to ask, they can do that.
After
during
the person, maybe after the person makes their comment, could I ask a question?
I'm going to ask our chief legal counsel again on protocol. I don't believe that is usually am I correct on that, Peg?
Yes, Mr. Chair, there would be, if individual would ask questions during public comment, or you have questions of that person, that is not appropriate to ask them questions. This is not a public hearing, but just to hear their comments about items that are on the agenda or may not be on the agenda. So we do not follow up on those items from the dais or following up with staff.
Clear. We're ready for the sign-in. We can proceed.
First speaker is John Frankie.
Good evening. My name is John Frankie. I reside at 2222 North 600 Road, Eudora, Kansas, about 1.5 miles west of the county line, right on 600 Road. I want to thank the planning staff of Johnson County, the Douglas County planning staff, and the Douglas County commissioners for the exemplary work that they've been doing. God, I wouldn't want to be in any of your seats. I really wouldn't. But I want to thank you for what you're doing and the due diligence that you've been putting in despite all of the things that have been going on behind the scenes and continue. What I'm asking for tonight is that you all step back, apply common sense, and be reasonable in all the measures and the rules and regulations that you established. I was pretty pleased, not great, but pretty pleased when you all presented to the county commissioners the original zoning. I was really surprised the county commissioners turned it down and sent you back to revisit. And it almost appeared that they just want you to follow whatever next year is one. And I find that very concerning as a Kansas resident and a former Johnson County resident and a current Douglas County resident. I've been spending a lot of time since I was aware of this in October, and 3 minutes is definitely not long enough. I would like the Planning Commission to revisit all of the public comments, focus on the letters from Gardner, the letters from Edgerton, two of the cities that are most closely impacted by this, the residents. The other thing, and I'm gonna cut it short tonight. When you all put this out on November 18th of what the plans are throughout this process, and I'm not gonna read it all, planning staff will be balancing accommodating the requirements of solar facilities with the county needs too. There's about 8 bullet points there. Revisit that. Every one of those I see. It seems like next year is putting a lot of pressure on. I understand the locals and I want our community to stay together. I understand every side of this coin, and I just ask for reasonable and common sense, and don't just push this through because it's powers to be want you to. Thank you. One other, I got 46 seconds. If any of you have any questions for me, you've got my address. I welcome all the planning commission, all the county commissioners, any interested parties to come out to our farm and we can walk around and talk about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Frankie.
The next speaker is Carrie Brandon.
Carrie Brandon, 450 East 2300 Road, Eudora, Kansas. I think maybe Megan or someone passed out. Did each one of you get one of these printouts? I emailed this to you all, I believe, about maybe a couple weeks ago. And I actually also presented it at one of the Thursday 9:30 a.m. Board of County Commissioner meetings. Basically what it is it is an example of what we hope that all of us are thinking about with regards to responsible siting for utility scale solar. You know, we've been so hell-bent on focusing on ag land for the use of photovoltaics. We haven't really talked about other alternatives, and that is responsible to talk about other alternatives. In this that I handed out to you, it's a request for Johnson County officials, specifically Ed Eilert, to make a public request to Warren Buffett of the Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railway Intermodal and Nathaniel Hagendorn, I think I said that right, who's the CEO of North Point Development, and then all of the major industry that is either purchased warehouse, square footage, which there's millions and millions of square feet in North Point's development over there, to also step up and have a conversation about how to integrate utility scale solar power facilities on top of these millions of square feet of flat warehouse rooftops. I haven't really seen anyone talking about it. And so I wanted to raise that issue. I put together a layered map, which is on one of the pages, and there's a URL. You can go look at it. It's a kind of a estimated acreage, but if you combine rooftop of all of those completed warehouses with the scrap ground that surrounds them, and you get creative with solar parking canopies, which that's pretty ingenious. If you think about it, it provides shelter from the heat and the elements for the cars parked under them, also the people walking to and from their cars. And you can also integrate electric vehicle charging stations right there too. Why not, right? And it's located across the street from the base power station. No long transmission lines. And you should be giving first right of refusal to the farmers who have been displaced by North Point's industrial development. There's some holdouts over there. Those people should be the ones that should have the ability to refuse a ground lease that would pay them lucratively so that they can, get out of that living situation, improve their quality of life, but still hang on to their land. So I want you to read this. Please reach out if you have questions, but let's get creative and responsible.
Thank you, Terry Brandon.
The next speaker is Joyce Whittier.
My name is Joyce Whittier. I live at 7414 Flint Street, Shawnee, Kansas. In May, every year, you all have a training session with some attorney, whether it's from the county or outside. Back in 2017, in May, Don Jarrett gave a presentation, and it talks about what qualifies as agricultural land and what can and cannot be done from a rezoning standpoint. He mentioned 8 cases filed by various individuals against the rezoning, and all 8 of them were decided in favor of the landowner who brought the lawsuit. But these cases, not a single one involved anywhere near the kind of acreage that this solar farm does. But one thing he pointed out, Johnson County is one of 2 counties in the state that are considered urban. And because they are urban counties, the statute for that is KSA 192654. But because of that, these are 2 things that, well, one major thing that apply only to urban counties. No such determination, nor rule, nor regulation shall be held to apply to the use of land for agricultural purposes, nor for the erection or maintenance of buildings thereon, for such purposes so long as the buildings erected thereon are used for agricultural purposes and not otherwise. And that is the statute, the urban county statute, that applies in this case. It doesn't apply to anybody but Johnson and Sedgwick County. So you need to keep that in mind. And I want to call your attention to the fact that one member of the Planning Commission has a conflict of interest that she has failed to disclose. Terry Atwell was a member of the Southwest Consolidated Zoning Board. And on August 25th of 2021, she mentioned speaking to various landowners in her capacity as a member of the Farm Bureau Board. That is an ex parte communication. She did not disclose it at the Southwest Consolidated Board, and she did not disclose it tonight. She does have an actual conflict of interest, the exact same conflict that Randy Hudgens has that caused him to be recused. Thank you.
Thank you, Joyce Whittier.
The next speaker is Lisa Huppy.
Good evening. I'm Lisa Huppy. I live at 17535 Edgerton Road. I'm here tonight to talk a little bit about land value and devaluation from utility scale solar facilities across the nation. I found it interesting at the April 4th Board of County Commissioner meeting that the appraiser said he had researched the effect of home values of other facilities and found that homes devalued, but then their value came back up in 3 to 4 years. And admittedly, he said it was a 10-acre solar farm or a solar garden, I guess. And the nearest home was a quarter mile away. That's 1,320 feet from the nearest home, right? So the Board of County Commissioners and you are looking at 2,000 acres and a 250-foot setback from a dwelling, a non-participating dwelling. 250 feet, a football field. from a non-participating dwelling. If you don't think that's going to devalue those homes, think again. I've been a realtor for 20 years. That will devalue our homes, period. There's no question on that. And your responsibility is to your citizens, right? So think about that. I was very upset that the Board of County Commissioners just totally dismissed all the hard work that you have done, because we appreciate the work you've done. You've been working on this for a year, right? So 1,000 acres and, 2 miles from the city boundaries, that's what the cities want that, right? Not a mile from a city boundary. That stops them from being able to be produce and further develop. I got really nervous all of a sudden. Sorry, I don't know why. Take a breath, Lisa. So at minimum 500 feet from a property line, but to Carrie's point, why have to put it in a green zone to begin with? There are so many more opportunities in this county to put these facilities in a green zone. And that's where NextEra is looking at putting their facilities all over our country, not just our county, not just our state. Look at Potawatomi and Wabunsee counties, green fields. That's what they're doing. They need to look at brownfields and other opportunities. Mr. Frankie, you're brilliant on your comments. Thank you. Look at the study that we gave to you, scan the QR code. We've given this report to you before. Mary McClinton Clay has done research all over the nation showing facts that properties are devalued by these large utility scale solar facilities. You need to make sure you're being mindful when you're putting in these regulations, respecting your citizens, and not just bending over to large money out of state investors. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
The next speaker is Alan Anglin.
Alan Anglin, 17090 Evening Star Road, Edgerton, Kansas. First of all, I want to thank you all, regardless of how your views on utility scale solar. I appreciate that you're volunteers and you do the service for free. Second, as you're aware, Douglas County has approved, their board has approved their zoning regulations for setbacks around existing residents. They approved 500 feet. So I encourage you, as you look at larger utility scale solars and to consider what it's like if you're going to be out there and how you're going to be impacted. Somebody like me who lives next to where the proposed site is, 500 feet would be much better than 250 feet, both from the perspective of home value, stormwater drainage, and just the impact of living next to a utility, an industrial site. Second, I'll bring to your attention, in the April 4th Board of County meeting, there was a document that was never covered by the planning staff, nor covered by the Board of County Commissioners. It was document number 14 in the package, and it was titled Similarly Sized Facilities in Urbanizing Counties. Analysis had the following conclusion, which I'll read. Upon further review of projects and locations, the significant variation in both populations and county area became apparent. Given this, and taking population density into account, perhaps the best and only comparable above, and they were comparing against 48 other urbanizing counties all across the United States, and said would be the Pflugerville East Blackland Solar Project in Travis County, Texas. Certainly, there are examples of projects that are greater than 1,000 acres, but these are almost exclusively located in counties with significantly less persons per square mile than Johnson County. Staff concludes that the 1,000 acre maximum project area is suitable given the density of Johnson County and potential for additional growth. All right, that said, I want to get that on the record. Also, I would encourage that as you look at input coming from the various cities that have been requested to provide input, give deference to Gardner and Edgerton. Those are the cities most likely to be impacted, and what they say matters to them. They'll be the ones whose growth is impacted. Lastly, there's a recommendation that's part of tonight's package that wasn't input before, hasn't been considered and discussed earlier, but staff made a recommendation that stormwater performance bonds, instead of being required, are optional. They'd be optional at staff or optional at the board's recommendations, may be required. I live downhill from the proposed site, 70 feet over the course of a half mile, and it drains across my driveway. I've had to invest about $5,000 to add culvert capacity, and that's with an existing cow pasture. That gets scraped of all of the grass. My driveway is going to wash away. Make that performance bond required, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan.
Mr. Chairman, the next speaker and the last speaker on the speakers list is Jane Canocci. But he is going to speak.
Good evening. My name is Jane Canocchi, 23535 West 74th Street, Shawnee, Kansas. As you're probably aware, most of you, that I'm one of the landowners, part of the Canocchi family, with land in both Johnson and Douglas County. And I want to tell you that your regulations were pretty good. We appreciated as a family the effort you put in on decommissioning. We thought you did a fine job on that, and we're quite pleased with that. You also have an awful lot of things in there for mitigation, for proper setback, for protections. However, in April, the Johnson County Commissioners reviewed your solar facilities, not just utility scale, but all of them, your solar facility regulations. They have a different vision on supporting solar development in the county. They see it as an opportunity for Johnson County. I see them taking the position that solar power development makes good sense and good business sense. So this is back to you for review and discussion and action. So I provided each of you with a copy of Solar Power, the Best Neighbor Ever. So I believe that's been handed out. Thank you. And I wanted to talk about the fact that solar power is high value and low impact. And I wanted to point out just a few points on it. With the solar power, you have no noise to keep you awake or disturb your family. There are no strangers living behind you, watching you across the fence. There's no strange smell, loud noise, raucous behavior to disturb your neighborhood. And there's no surprise strip malls or other disruptive development right beside you. If you like the quiet and the peace there with the solar facility, it's still going to be there. The only big impact that I see, and it's on the back of the sheet, is the traffic during installation, the construction traffic during installation. So I got 53 seconds left, so I'm going to go off my script, and I'm going to talk to you about something I mentioned quite a few meetings ago. And it goes along with Joyce Whittier's point about agriculture and zoning. And the Board of County Commissioners has posted right there on their website a resolution that they will support agritourism and agricultural business, agribusiness. And solar farms are growing energy by taking the free sunshine and converting it to energy. So if that's not part of agribusiness, then I think that you would be hard pressed in a court of law to go against that. So please consider that. Thank you again for your volunteer times, like Mr. Frankie said.
Thank you, Jane.
Speakers signed up unless there's someone who wishes to speak who didn't sign up at this time. What about Zoom? What are you doing Zoom now? If there are no other speakers, then we'll go to the Zoom speaker, Stephen Clark.
Good evening. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Steve Clark. I live at 3422 Kensington Court in El Dorado Hills, California. My wife and her family own rural property in southwestern Johnson County, which they'd like to be included in a solar farm. I'm a registered professional engineer with over 42 years experience permitting, designing, and constructing power plants of all types. I have over 14 years experience permitting, designing, and constructing solar photovoltaic projects across the U.S. and internationally. Here are the reasons why I believe the Planning Commission should follow the BOCC's direction and revise the draft solar zoning regulations as the BOCC requested. To be viable, solar farms need at least 25-year permit terms. And they also need to be commercially viable in Johnson County, no more than 1.5 mile distance from city boundaries and 2,000 acres. Solar farms are proven in commercial operation by more than 1,000 facilities in successful operation across the US since 2007. These 1,000 solar farms have operated without impacting their neighbors or the environment in any significant way. Ground mount solar farms produce electricity at pricing that's 2 to 3 times less than rooftop solar and solar canopies would. 50 million acres of farmland are currently either in the federal CRP program or used to grow corn for ethanol with federal subsidies. So there should be no concern about solar farms taking land out of ag production. There have been no fires, explosions, or toxic material releases from solar farms that have impacted the public. The power generated by the fleet of solar farms has avoided millions of tons of CO2 from being emitted into our atmosphere. Solar produces electricity at lower pricing than any conventional power plant. Solar farm electricity pricing is not subject to inflation like natural gas and coal-fired power that are impacted greatly currently by inflation. Solar farms produce no wastewater, no ash, and have minimal noise. They have a low visual profile. They use no water. Independent studies conclude solar farms, when properly regulated with setbacks, visual screening, and other measures, do not cause any reduction to nearby property values. Solar farms would allow Johnson County to meet its commitments to climate reduction goals. And finally, government should allow private landowners to develop their properties as they see fit when the property development does not negatively impact others. Thank you for your time and for listening.
Thank you, Stephen.
The next Zoom speaker is Alan Bowman.
I'm Alan Bauman. My address is 4502 West 93rd Terrace, Prairie Village. And I want to thank the Planning Commission for allowing me to speak. Cheaper solar means lower utility bills and economic development advantages for Johnson County compared to counties with higher costs. First, the economics of solar. The cost of developing a new solar facility has decreased 90% in 10 years. In 2021, utility solar development lifetime costs are less than coal or natural gas. Since then, the STARS reported soaring gas bills are straining Kansas City home budgets. Are more hikes on the way? Article quotes a 68% increase in January's gas bills. Natural gas is subject to the vagaries of international markets, such as Russia and OPEC, and can't compete with solar, which will always be free. Second, local generation results in cheaper electricity and greater grid security. Longer electric lines will result in a generated loss of electricity and thus higher costs. Also, longer lines are more likely to suffer storm damage with prolonged outages than shorter lines. So if solar is cheaper, why burden it with unreasonable expectations? One of these previous sessions, it was discussed that the national average for conditional use permit is 40 years to no limitation at all. I certainly support a 40-year conditional use permit. Second, 1,000-acre limit to solar development is less than what we need to ensure adequate energy for Johnson County. The unincorporated area of the county is 121,000 acres. I support using at least 3,000 acres to ensure our competitive economy with our neighbors. Finally, third, the setback was increased from 1 mile to 2 miles. This reduces the area of development from 44,000 acres to 10,000 acres. I support a return to the original setback of 1 mile. Please ensure a competitive economic future and lower utility bills for Johnson County. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Alan.
Mr. Chairman, there are no other listed speakers.
Okay, that's it Next thing on our agenda is the additions and deletions. Are there any?
Mr. Chair, this is Sean Penley, planning staff. There's no other changes recommended by staff.
I see none. Okay. The next thing on the agenda is approval of minutes.
This is Karen Miller with planning staff. I was going by the adopted bylaws and their order of business, and I didn't take into account that this is a special meeting and there are no minutes for us to approve. So we can skip that one.
All right. Thank you, Karen. The next item on the agenda is solar facilities amendments to the comprehensive plan.
Mr. Chairman, Jay Leipzig, Planning Director. I'll give a brief introduction to this item this evening and then go over just a couple of housekeeping items and then turn it over to the planning staff, namely Karen Miller, that will be doing most of the presentation this evening. And I'll just read this agenda item. On April 4th, 2022, the Board of County Commissioners, during a special meeting to consider solar facilities, voted to return the amendments and standards recommended by the Planning Commission on December 14th, 2021 for further consideration of 8 items. The further request that the Planning Commission provide responses and recommendations regarding the 8 items by May 24th, 2022. So that being said, I'm going to turn over to a memorandum that was in your packet. It's dated May 3rd, 2022, and provide a brief overview of the background of this item. But before I do that, I wanted to mention we have this evening, if necessary, although I don't think it is, we do have overflow space available in the lower level, room 200, down in the basement of this building, in the lower level, if additional seating is needed or required. The other thing to note is that any comments that were received before 2:00 p.m. on May 2nd were included in the printed packet for all Planning Commission members. If there was anything that was received after that date, after the 2 p.m. deadline, up to 2:00 in the afternoon on May 9th, those items were emailed to all Planning Commission members. And we have received one additional comment that's on your dais this evening. I wanted to note that, as well as the comment letter that Ms. Canocci just mentioned to you previously in her presentation this evening. So in terms of housekeeping items, I wanted to state that. The other brief overview for this item, and there again, I apologize, I'll read to you again. This kind of summarizes where we are to this point. Over the course of a year, 9 public meetings, 7 of which entertained public comment, including city comments, the Planning Commission worked to draft amendments to the Rural Comprehensive Plan and the Johnson County zoning and subdivision regulations for the purpose of regulating solar facilities, including utility scale solar facilities within unincorporated Johnson County. Also included were the adoption and incorporation by reference of 2 published safety standards regarding battery energy storage facilities associated with solar facilities. Once drafted, the proposed amendments were considered at a public hearing on November 16th, 2021, and the Planning Commission final recommendations were sent to the Board of County Commissioners on December 14th, 2021. Upon receipt of the Johnson County Planning Commission recommendations, the Board of County Commissioners studied the draft amendments with planning staff during a committee of the whole meeting on February 24th, 2022, and set a public hearing date for April 4th, 2022 to further consider the matter. During the public hearing, the Board of County Commissioners considered staff and consultant presentations and approximately 40 comments made in person or virtually during the hearing, in addition to other information in the record of the proceedings, which can be found on the link that's provided at www.jocogov.org/solar, which is the county's webpage dedicated to the consideration of solar facilities. So just an additional note, any information in regard to solar is included on that link on the webpage. During the public hearing, the Board of County Commissioners voted to return the amendments and standards to the Planning Commission for further consideration of 8 items, the details of which are enumerated in the following sections. And Karen will go over those very briefly. The BOCC, or the Board of County Commissioners, further requested that the Planning Commission provide responses and recommendations regarding the 8 items by May 24th, 2022. In the event that the Planning Commission does not provide a recommendation by this date, the Planning Commission recommendation issued on December 14th, 2021 will again be submitted to the Board of County Commissioners for their consideration. So that completes my introduction this evening to this item, and Karen will walk through the further details of this memo and kind of explain the process that we have before you this evening. I want to say that this could be potentially a long meeting. As I said, we do have breaks scheduled. We're hoping to complete all of these items or go through this process this evening, if at all possible. If not, then the other date of May 24th is our next regularly scheduled meeting. So with that, I'll turn it over to Karen Miller.
Thank you. Karen Miller with the Planning Department. So the Planning Commission on December 14th recommended a series of amendments to the comp plan and zoning regulations and the adoption of 2 standards to the Board of County Commissioners. And they held a public hearing. They considered that recommendation. They listened to the public, discussed, and recommended to the Planning Commission to consider 8 particular items for further consideration. And so that's called remanding back. So that set of amendments was remanded back to the Planning Commission. We're looking at it today. And so the planning staff inserted those 8 recommendations into the suggested recommended amendments that Planning Commission looked at on December 14th. So right now, what's before us is, I'm going to call them the draft May 10th amendments. And what that is what the Planning Commission recommended with the Board of County Commissioners' suggestions incorporated into that. And so that's what we'll be discussing. And so the goal is for the Planning Commission tonight to look at that and look at those 8 issues that the board has suggested and decide what the Planning Commission as a body thinks about that. And so we'll follow a process so that we can move through consideration of these eight remanded items. And there'll be 3 steps. The first step is that we will pull the draft May 10th amendments onto the floor for discussion. We'll need a motion to pull it onto the floor and a second, and we don't need to vote on it at this time. So we're just pulling this body that has the Planning Commission's recommendations along with the Board of County Commissioners' suggestions. So we're pulling that onto the floor for consideration. And then we will march through the 8 directives one by one and see if the Planning Commission as a body would like to amend that. And we'll pull them up, we'll have them on the screen. And if the Planning Commission wishes to amend a particular directive, I'll have wording for that motion to amend. So we'll pull the body of the May 10th amendments onto the floor. We will look at each directive item. We'll decide if the Planning Commission would like to amend them. And there's a process we'll do for each amendment. And then at the end, after we've looked at each of the 8 items, we'll circle back and we'll have a final motion that says that the Planning Commission is adopting the May 10th amendments with the following changes. And it's whatever Planning Commission decides tonight. And then that will be sent forward to the Board of County Commissioners. As Jay mentioned, if this Planning Commission does not finish this consideration by May 24th, then your previous December 14th recommendation will be forwarded to the Board of County Commissioners. So there's a time limit on this. Hopefully we'll get done tonight, and if not, we'll try again May 24th. So,
Dave Johns, can I ask a question for clarity?
sure.
So our December 14th is no longer what we're voting on tonight. It's what they decided and put back to us. So the 1,000 acres is now 2,000 acres, and we will discuss if we want to abide by what they sent back to us, or if
Yeah.
we want to continue with 1,000 acres.
Yeah,
Got it.
yes. And so what I did is and so ultimately we need to have, a set of regulations. And so I took the December 14th regulations, and I took the Board of County Commissioners suggestions and folded them in. So that is what we have tonight. And with each time we look at a directive, one option would be to put it back.
Jim Neese, I'm not sure I understood that. In other words, the county commissioners decided, they remanded it back to us to see whether or not, so it's a done deal then? Is that what you're saying?
No. They're asking you to give them feedback and tell you what you think about 8 particular things.
Okay.
It is not a done deal.
Okay.
So this is another recommendation, just like you recommended December 14th.
Mr. Chairman, this is Peg Trent, Chief Counsel, if I may. I just want to also add on to what Karen has provided the Planning Commission. When you vote, so when each amendment, whether you move to amend, so you have all 8 amendments for your consideration, you will go one by one to vote on each of them, and you can move to remove it, leave it in, whatever you want to do. But when you vote, you have to tell why this is unique, why you're voting the way you are. What staff is doing then is recording your reasons of why you voted the way you are on that particular amendment, in order that can be captured to be brought to the commissioners. And for clarification, the commissioners were asking you as a planning commission to consider these 8 amendments. They weren't telling you, they wanted you to review it, and they want to hear your thoughts on those 8 amendments and why, you are voting one way or another. So the main motion comes on the floor with the 8 amendments, and we're just doing this because it's the easiest way to bring this forward to you. Then you'll go one by one through each of those directives, actually looking at, for instance, I think there was the setback. And then you'll go through the setback, and Karen will go through that language of what was proposed in the amendments that are before you from May 10th today. And then if you don't want it in, or you want it amended, then you do a motion to amend or whatever you want. There's a second, and then you're going to take a vote all the way down and telling why you're voting the way you are. And so what you're trying to do is we're trying to do a process to capture your opinion back to the commissioners as to why or why not you don't think that's a good idea to have that amendment. Does that make some sense?
Jim Neese, got one quick question. So in other words, we can stay where we were, adopt the county commissioner's recommendation, or modify where we were.
Correct. And so you have that option. The only rule is that you need to tell why when you vote. And that's so that Karen and staff can capture it to make sure the commissioners understand your rationale of why you're doing, why when you're reviewing those 8, you're either recommending or not. They're wanting you to review these 8. So they're not telling you, they're wanting you to consider these 8.
Dave Johns, one other question on clarity. So as I read verbatim every line from the April 4th meeting, Chairman Howard ended it like this. So I just want to see where we're at. When the Planning Commission makes its review and makes any recommendations, it comes back to the Board of County Commissioners. and the commissioners will have the final determination of any aspect of any of the items. So with that concludes our meeting.
That is correct. So what will happen, you're a recommending board, but they want to hear your rationale of why or why not. And then at that point, they will consider, and yes, you are correct. They have the final say, just like any other regulations that you have been reviewing.
Kelly Rass. So basically, even though we've gone through this for almost a year, listened, and taxpayers have paid for a consulting group to consult with us, we've had questions, numerous public comments, numerous discussions amongst ourselves to come up with the recommendations that we already did with rationale, sent them up to the BOCC. They have sent them back to us without any of their data points. And they want us to, once again, explain why we feel the way we did after doing this for 9 months. Is that clear?
Mr. Chairman, if I may address that, just to clarify, some of these are new pieces of information that you did not have before you, such as transmission lines being considered. You did not have that. They've included waivers. They've got into reimbursement for a fire station or any type of fire. That was not considered by this board. So those are items they want you to go back and consider and see what your thoughts are in there. Some of them, you are correct, are a repeat. I think 3 or 4 of them are a repeat what you previous, but there's brand new things in here that they wanted you to review. So this is why they are asking you as a planning commission to provide your thoughts.
Kelly Ross, fair enough.
Thank you. This is step 1, and we're going to take 1 and then go to the next one. So the initial motion, are there any other comments, questions concerning this step 1 initial motion?
So this is Karen Miller. The initial motion brings the draft May 10th amendments onto the floor. So if somebody could make the initial motion, and if we could have a second, but then we don't need a vote, then after we move this onto the floor, we'll start looking at each directive.
This is Kelly Ross. I make a motion that we bring to the floor for discussion purposes only the May 10th draft.
Is there a second?
Dave Johns, I'll second.
And motion and seconded. Okay.
So then we go to step 2, which is going through each of the 8 remanded items. And just in case this helps people, I have the process for each directive written down. We introduce the item to be discussed. I'll read the caption. I'll go through, I'll describe the item. I'll ask if the planning commissioners have questions on the item, and then the chairman will entertain motions related to the item. And if there's a second, then we'll have a vote, and each planning commissioner will be asked to provide a reason for his and her vote. If there is no desire on the part of the planning commission to change that item, we'll just move on to the next directive. All right. So here we go. Oh, and if there is a desire to make a motion to amend a directive, here's the example. And whenever anybody wants it, we can put this up on the screen. It's upon further discussion and consideration, I move that the Planning Commission amend the initial motion by amending directive number, like for instance, we'll be looking at number 1, which is set forth by the board as follows. There's a caption, you'll read the caption, to instead, and then you set forth how you would like the directive to change. So here is directive 1, clarification how off-street maintenance and repair will be required of the applicant and administered by county staff. So if the if the regulations were to be remanded, county staff wanted to be able to relook at this particular section just to see if there were improvements. So legal staff reviewed and edited sections relating to the documentation of road conditions and road improvement, maintenance and repair. This is mainly just improved. It's been made more concise by staff. It's still the function of the section hasn't changed. The actual new text is set forth here and also on the handout for the Planning Commission. Are there any questions by planning commissioners?
I've got, Jim Neese, I got one quick question. Mr. Huggins brought up a question about a potential sewer district in a certain area. Does this
On the
cover,
western part of the
does
county.
this all cover all utilities, or is it just roads and streets? Or is that a different?
This is just roads and streets. This is for the context of when usually if there's going to be some damage to roads, it'll be during installation and decommissioning. And this is just to make sure that if we need it, that first that the applicant identifies the routes that they're going to use when they install things and decommission, that the road conditions are documented prior, and then providing surety if needed.
Dave Johns, just so I don't miss it with all the different writings. If there's a section that Mr. England, I think, mentioned performance pond, if that is in here.
That's not in here.
Okay.
That will be later. That'll be one of the very last things we look at.
Okay, I just want to make sure I didn't miss it.
Yes, yeah.
I'm Kelly Ross. I just have one question regarding so if there is a violation, how is that taking place? Like if they're not maintaining, because I will like to bring up, there is a case, Orange County, which is the county right next to Spotsylvania Solar Project. They are suing the other county due to this type of stuff. And we don't have that problem, but this does show that the trucks and the routes that they're going on and the constant trucks on these small rural roads creates quite a hazard. And so, I mean, I look at, this is great for anybody who wants to kind of follow. The Spotsylvania Solar Project is really probably the only solar project that we should be comparing our area to, based on a little bit more of its similarities. And so I actually signed up and I now get their local newspaper with all the stuff that's going on, but they are having huge issues.
And planning staff tried to learn from the issues of other cities. And we pulled in Public Works, we pulled in the legal department. We've talked with other communities. Our Public Works has developed some recommended additions and guidance regarding stormwater that they've drafted. They're planning on coming to the Board of County Commissioners soon. And so in terms of our requirements, we've looked at that and our Public Works is on top of that. In terms of when an application is considered by the county, first of all, we look at what's there already and we document it. And then if the county engineer thinks that its surety is needed for the project, if it's a larger project, keep in mind that utility scale solar facilities can be as small as 11 acres. If there's 11 acres, maybe you don't need surety. But if it's 1,000 acres or 2,000 acres, maybe you do need surety. So, it's up to the county and staff to look at the situation and see, do we think there's possibly going to be an issue? And then The other thing to point out is that at the very beginning, the U.S. solar facility or owner operator shall be responsible for any damage to public roads caused by the installation or decommissioning of the U.S. solar facility. So no matter what, they are responsible for it. The surety just makes it a little bit easier to follow through and get something repaired if needed. The surety is just there is if things break down and the applicant doesn't repair things, we can come in and make sure they get repaired.
Commissioner Ratt, this is Sean Penley, Planet Staff. I'll just add to what Karen said. There, as part of the requirements, in addition to the surety, if necessary, there's also, we anticipate a development agreement will be entered in. Each individual facility will enter into a development agreement that may include road repair requirements. As far as enforcement, to the question, how would there be an enforcement of a violation? If, as according to the approved or the conditional use permit as it's approved, if there is any violation of a required road improvement or if there's any damages to a road, I think that'd be handled on an individual basis as part of that agreement. There may be responsibilities of the facility operator. We did, and that would all be a part of the conditional use permit, and that's how we would handle that as a case-by-case basis as needed for enforcement. We did, as Karen also mentioned, in coordinating with other jurisdictions, we've had consulted with them as to how they handle these for existing facilities that are in operation, and they handle those the same way. As part of an agreement, the facility operator is responsible for any damages in the road, and that's something that'll have to be documented as part of this process. But that's how we would handle that, is just an individual basis as to during the construction and development of the facility.
Thank you, George Lund, Chair. Please note that each planning commissioner is given the opportunity to say what they want or take questions or ask questions about this. So if there are any further questions about this, please let me know what it is.
Jim Neese, I got one quick question. We keep talking about 2,000 acres. That's all we hear. Is it 2,000 acres or is it 2,500 acres? Is it 3.1 square miles or is it 4 miles? Some of the literature says 4 square miles. And everything that you presented says 2,000 acres. And I thought that there was a overreach of almost, a square mile above 2,000 acres. So which is it? I just need that clarified.
Commissioner Neese, this is Sean Penley.
I can't really hear you, Sean.
Sean Penley, is this better? Okay, so I think what I would suggest is we address the maximum project area in another directive. So what I would suggest, although it does reference it here, we're referencing back to the maximum area. I would suggest we have that discussion with that directive, which I believe is Directive 5. We'll handle that discussion about the maximum area.
Well, Jim Neese, with all due respect, Sean, we've been talking about this, make presentation to county commissioners, you to us, and to the public, and the pieces that you put up for everybody to see, say 2,000 acres. So it doesn't make a difference to me whether that's another discussion. I think for the staff to be talking about this, if the present regulation, I could be wrong, encompasses more than 2,000 acres, then that's what we ought to be saying rather than 2,000 acres. That's just my point, because there's a difference to me between 3 square miles and 4 square miles. So that's the only point I want to make.
Terry Atwell. Karen, I have a question for you on this directive number 1. Do we require a directive like this for any other industry, say for rock quarries, intermodal?
Yes. We've modeled this idea after our sunflower quarry. We looked at the road agreement for the sunflower quarry. So yes, we have done that. And also like soil, topsoil operations, there's road agreements.
Okay, because, over by where we live on Dilly, we can get upwards of 100 trucks a day. So that would be 200 because they're going and coming back. And we have had major issues with our road being broke off because the road is so narrow and it breaks off, and we have had issues in the past about getting it repaired. So I was wondering who would have been responsible if those trucks are coming from a quarry. How are you determining who's going to pay for that?
That'd be the county engineer, and looking.
And this is Peg Trent. We're going off on a tangent on another issue. We need to stay directed to the issue at hand because that's off agenda. So we can address that offline at another about your specific incident. But I think we need to focus on the agreement or directive that's on the floor right now.
Thank you. That is correct. Everyone has had a chance to think about this that is here. Any further comments? Yes.
Roger Mason. I see in the notes here on the directive, it talks about pages 37 through 39. And there's a lot of writing on there. Could somebody help me through that? You got staff stuff and county commission stuff, and I'm not sure where this lands.
So pages 37 through 39 are in the draft yes, in those. And I have clipped that from pages 37 through 39 and put it right here. So you can choose where you'd like to look. And so are you wanting like a summary? Okay. So public road improvement, repair and maintenance. This would include bridges and drainage structures, guardrails, all that other type of stuff. So the purpose of this whole section is to establish that the applicant is responsible for any kind of damage to the road or any appurtenant equipment regarding the road. And so in paragraph I, it sets forth that the first thing you do is identify the haul routes, identify the roads that will be used during installation and decommissioning. And then double I says that the existing road conditions shall be documented. And it talks about kind of how we can do that. Triple I says that any damage caused by the all of those activities is the U.S. Solar Facilities expense, and that the county engineer can require financial surety to make sure that any sort of damage is addressed. And then number 4, like an I-5, the county engineer may require one mitigation plan. For example, at the beginning installation and in decommissioning.
This is Kelly Ross. I just have one comment. So a lot of these projects can take 2, 3, 4 years to complete and build. So should we put a time, if there is a road condition that is unfavorable, because we have to think the citizens are driving there every day, it could cause a flat tire, it could cause a wreck, some sort of time frame condition that if an area is deemed damaged, that the operator has a time frame to get it done. In other words, between this and like zoning board stuff, and this was one of my priorities for the planning commission that we need to put in the comprehensive plan, we have nothing to hold people accountable for violations. And it's great. This is all preliminary stuff. I agree with all of it. But when things go wrong, that's not the time to then come up with, and I know we have the surety, but we need data points with that. How long they have to remedy it. How's it going to get remedied? Are they going to do it? And if they don't start doing it, then the county takes over and sends them the bill. But I mean, there needs to be a time frame because these citizens are might be using these same roads every day. And
so
it could cause
one idea to think about is this is setting out the framework for solar facilities. And just remember, when we talk about this, it can be a wide range of intensities for a project. It can be 10 acres, or it can be more than that. And so don't forget that there will be a conditional use permit for an actual application. So personally, it's my opinion that that would be the more appropriate time to put time limits and things like that. And just a note that as part of these regulations, there's this overall development agreement that's required, this overall blanket in which for each project we look at the context, we look at the particulars, and the zoning board, the Board of County Commissioners, and staff all work together to decide what is appropriate and what level of control and requirements are
Kelly
needed.
Ross, I agree with all that. I just feel like a simple statement of time is of the essence from repair, or a blanket statement that it will, a time factor will be put in there. I mean, this is what we are setting guidelines. We don't have to go into the details with the CUP, but there needs to be some sort of emphasis that if there's damage to a road that is, causing citizens issues and they're driving every day, or they have teenagers or young children, because out there you can drive probably at age 14 if you have a farm license. One time on a dangerous road can be a bad thing. So in my opinion, I hear everything you're saying, but there's nothing wrong with putting something in there that, time up that, something, just a blanket statement will be put in there that a time factor will be.
So here's the template to amend if you would like to make the amendment.
But Jim Neese, I got a quick comment. Wouldn't the zoning board, when they look at this, wouldn't they put that? That's when you put those types of stipulations, because they're going to come to us, the zoning board, with a request, and we're going to look at that. And in that,
I agree, but it's just to make sure they're thinking of that and it comes up and they do take care of it at that time. It may be missed.
Okay.
And this is the planning commission. It is supposed to set guidelines. So it's a guideline that any kind of damage to roads should be repaired in an appropriate time frame based on whatever the damage is. That's all.
Okay.
Okay, I will.
Thank you for your comments. I am now open to a motion. If anyone would want to provide a motion for this.
Kelly Ross, I make a motion that we add some sort of just general time frame statement that if there is damage to a road, that it needs to be fixed in an appropriate time frame.
Any other comment?
Is there a second to that?
Is there a second?
I'll second that. Dave Johns, would that be letter V as in 5?
It would be,
As part of that initiative 1? Just adding it to the
It's like adding a suggested amendment.
V. Do
that would be fine, yes.
Okay. Sure. You need us to read it like that's up here on the screen?
That's correct. We just need I think there's a motion. So that motion is that amendment to that initial motion that Commissioner Rast. So we just need a second, and then we'll vote on this amendment. Yes.
And
Second.
Mr. Chairman, just as a reminder, as you go through to vote, you have to state why you're supporting this or not supporting this amendment to put a reasonable amount of time frame in which a contractor would make the repairs that are needed to the road.
Okay, understood. Then you need to do that. There's been a second, so those who are in favor, say aye.
Oh,
Chairman, this is Peg Trent. I'm sorry, but as we get through this first directive and second, it will become second nature to all of you. But right now, you'll have to go one by one in a
One by
roll
one.
call in order for them to vote and tell why.
Okay, one by one.
Yes. Sorry, but
Roll
and then
call.
as we move through this, it'll get easier.
I'm going to actually abstain because, and my reasoning for that is because I don't like I think it needs to be more clear. It's not clear enough to me. It's just setting a very wide, what is reasonable. So I'm going to abstain.
I would vote in favor, and the reason I would is because I'd like to see this move forward. And I think it would move forward faster if we would approve it.
Dave Johns, I will vote for it. This whole initiative does make sense.
Jim Neese, I'll vote in favor, not because of the timing, with all due respect, Mr. Chairman, but the fact, my opinion is that the way the motion is not going to be contrary to what the zoning boards are going to establish anyway. So I can't see it if we put a general comment, although I would like to see the comment itself. Whether it's forever or whether it's doing construction. Like in the rock quarry, I'm going to digress here a minute, I'll make my point. The rock quarry, we had them, put in rumble strips for a certain period of time. We had to spec the road when they left the quarry and so on and so forth. So my point is that if you're going to put a generality in there, which is fine, I think it ought to be during construction or something, but I'll vote in favor of it.
Kelly Rast.
I vote in favor, and yes, it is during construction. And the point that I make this is so that it also is a reminder when the CUP is up that they get a little more detailed with this specific point and address it and don't forget about it to hold the operators accountable.
Randy Downing.
I wasn't for it, but quite frankly, I find this something that could all been handled at the county commission. I don't really understand why they thought they needed to send it back down when they've got all the people up there that could have made those decisions.
Randy Hutchins is absent. Chris Iliff is absent. Roger Mason.
I'll be voting for this. I echo my fellow commissioners' feelings that some of this could have been modified at county commission level without this reroute. But I think it's a good idea to have this in there, and we have adequate measures with our county engineer and the language in here. The county engineer and the zoning boards can put the specific size to the specific project. And it's not easy to write that for all projects. And so adequate sizing and time limits would be in place there.
Sean Penley, planning staff, Chair, I believe is Commissioner Atwell. Do that called?
Terry Atwell.
Terry Atwell, I'm in favor of this. I think it'd be a great reminder when it goes to the zoning boards. You can't ever have too much information in there for them to look at and think about when it goes to them. So I think it's a great idea.
So it is approved. So Jay, what now?
Mr. Chairman, Jay Leipzig, the Planning Director. I just want to make one brief comment on this housekeeping, and this process will get easier as we get more accustomed to it. But I do appreciate the brevity in the comments. I think is great, and just succinctly as possible state the reason why you're voting that way. And just to reiterate again, this will be part of the record. And so when that is reviewed by the Board of County Commissioners, that will be for each item. So this process, the way we have it outlined, will be very effective. But I think the more succinct the comments are, the better. And as we go through this, it'll get easier and as we get more familiar with the process. Thanks.
Mr. Chairman, if I, just one other house clean, just to make sure everyone's aware, if there aren't any further motions on Directive 1, if you do no further amendments, modifications or deletions, that will stay in this section that Karen just went through with that modification now that was put forward. And then you move on to the next directive. I just wanted to make sure I explained the obvious right now so we're all on the same page.
Oh, thank you very much. That does clarify it.
Mr. Chairman, Jay Leipzig again, if you want to, it might be a good time to call for a break if you all are comfortable with it.
Are we ready to take a quick break or do you want to go ahead? Break time. We'll take a 10-minute. Sure. 10-minute break. Shall we start on Directive 2?
Yes.
Directive 2, clarification that battery energy storage facilities are an allowed use in association with medium-scale solar facilities. So when planning brought the first draft to the Planning Commission, it was drafted that there was a new category of conditional use permit that allowed medium-scale and utility-scale solar facilities, and which may include associated battery energy storage facilities. And that was the intent all along. And when the performance standards for the medium-scale solar facilities were drafted inadvertently, it was put that medium-scale solar facilities shall not include accessory battery energy storage facilities. So that's a conflict. And so the request is to remove the conflicting wording that says medium-scale solar facilities shall not include accessory battery energy storage facilities. Any questions?
Just Dave Johns. So again, everything in red is what we, on December 14th, everything in blue is what was remanded back.
Mhm.
So if we choose to okay Directive 2, are we then also agreeing to the 2,000, the 1.5, or is that just written in
I'm
here?
sorry. I didn't quite know if that is, if you approve a later directive, changing it from 1,000 to 2,000, then staff would go through and remove all of that reference to 1,000 and 2,000. You know, that's, so please ignore that.
Oh.
1,000, 2,000.
Yes.
So Jimmy, so in other words, we could say that I could make a motion to approve this, but I would like to amend it saying that the area, the acreage be deferred. I don't know how to say this. exactly.
Sure,
Be
yes,
deferred
you
to
can
what
make
we
it clear.
determine for the facility size.
Yeah, you can defer that, yeah. And that was the intent.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, motion has been made
Roger Mason, second.
and a second. Any questions on the motion?
Just deferring the 2,000 and 1,000 and the 2 and the 1.5. Right?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay. Sorry, Dave Johns.
Kelly Rash, just to clarify too, it will, like, it'll have the same setbacks. So the battery storage will follow all the same setbacks as the large scale, whatever is set with large scale. Like, it has to be whatever is determined for a large scale, it'll have the same setbacks and all that, correct?
With the exception that what is different about medium scale is that the visual impact analysis, traffic study, and environmental impact assessment requirements may be waived or modified upon written approval. So remember that medium scale solar facilities are from 1 to 10 acres. So if this might be overkill, basically, for a smaller, and then also medium scale may be located within, and that'll be this 2 versus 1.5 will be deferred per a later discussion. Miles from any city limits, 1 mile from the boundary of an airport.
This would almost be for personal use, right? That size, a medium scale, Kelly Rass.
Not necessarily. I have seen
Could go to the grid even.
I have seen some maybe associated with a substation.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, thank you.
This is Sean Penley, planning staff. I'll just note too that this medium scale facility, this will still require a conditional use permit. So this will go through the same process as you
that's right.
indicated. So if there is battery energy storage proposed with a medium scale facility, it will still have to go through that CUP, and it will still be subject to the performance and development standards. And so we would go through that with the detail with each individual CUP application.
Perfect. Thank you for that reminder.
Jim Neese, I've got one quick question. I'll be quick. I believe during the public hearing to the county commissioners, the gentleman that, I don't know what his title is, that does the assessments of.
County
appraiser.
Thank you. Addressed one unit that was 10 acres. And unless I heard him wrong, they put a wall around that 10 acres in and around that city. Okay. What's staff's opinion of that? So let's say you put this in with a half a mile, and the half a mile could be, if it's 10 acres, could be in, adjacent, or whatever, a detailed development. So what is your thoughts about screening on a 10 acre tract? Just real quick, is that something?
Yeah, yes, you would be required to screen, depending on the situation. If
That's what
zoning board, could they require?
Yes.
Yes.
That
Sean
answered my
Penley,
question. Thank you.
That's correct, Mr. Neese. The zoning board could recommend a specific stipulation with the CUP regarding screening of a particular medium scale facility and battery storage. That's right. It's a case by case basis. I think if let's say you don't have an existing tree row around it or something, absolutely it needs to be screened, and there's various ways to accomplish that.
Okay, there is a motion and a second. Jay, we don't have to vote individually on this, do we? We can do it in group?
That is correct.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Actually, I think we do want to take a roll call for each one of these. If there's a motion.
Roll call. All right, roll call.
Sorry.
Directive 2, Terry Atwell.
I'll vote yes because it's gonna be required and the zoning boards will regulate it.
Michael Levin,
I'll vote yes because I believe it's a good requirement.
George Lund,
Yes, I vote in favor. Reason, I like it. I'm in favor of it. I want it.
Dave Johns,
Yes, this Dave Jones, I will vote in favor. It accomplishes what we need to accomplish on this factor.
Lindsay Grisay is absent. Mark Huggins is absent. Jim Neese,
Jim Neese, I'm in favor of this because the zoning boards could not only require a wall around something like that, they could also deny it in a certain area. So this is something that I'm in favor of.
Kelly Rast,
Yes, secondary to CUP.
Randall Downing,
I'm in favor. I think it'll be kind of be an interesting thing if they built this and they weren't allowed to put a energy storage facility in.
Randy Hutchins is absent. Chris Iliff is absent. Roger Mason.
I vote yes. It's important to clean up the document and make it consistent.
That's it.
Mhm.
Next, move on to Directive 3.
Directive 3, the addition of a performance standard related to battery energy storage facility uses requiring the solar facility applicant to supply specialized fire safety equipment or other protections if necessary for such use, and the requirement of applicants to supply and assume the costs of specialized fire safety equipment or other protections for the purpose of upholding the public health, safety, and welfare. So this proposed performance standards was drafted by staff and inserted into the battery energy storage performance standards. It states that the U.S. Solar Facility Development Agreement shall address provision of specialized battery energy storage facility safety equipment. for the purpose of upholding the public health, safety, and welfare, the U.S. Solar Facility Development Agreement shall address the provision of specialized fire safety equipment or other protections if necessary to support the battery energy solar facility use, and the cost of which or a portion thereof may be required to be reimbursed by the U.S. solar facility owner or operator. Any questions?
Are there questions on this from anyone? No? If there are no further questions, is there a motion?
Roger Mason, I move we accept the directive as sent back to us.
Kelly Rast, second.
Moved and seconded. So we'll vote on the motion.
Directive 3, Terry Atwell.
I'll vote yes, because it's important to make sure that we take that financial burden away from the taxpayers and place it on the company.
Michael Levin,
I'll vote yes for the same reasons.
George Lund,
I will vote yes for the purpose of upholding the public health and safety.
Dave Johns,
I'll vote yes. It was presented and discussed at the April 4th BOCC meeting. And
Lindsay Grisay is absent. Mark Huggins is absent. Jim Neese,
Jim Neese, I'll vote in favor for the purpose of upholding the public health and safety, the welfare of the county.
Kelly Rast,
I vote yes because this is reasonable and logical.
Randy Downing,
I vote yes. The fire department's not part of the county, certainly couldn't take the burden of the cost of this. So I think it's important that this be in there.
Randy Hutchins is absent. Chris Iliff is absent. Roger Mason.
Roger Mason votes yes. It clarifies the document and it becomes just a part of the cost of the project.
That's it.
Motion is approved. Thank you. Directive 4.
Directive number 4, a 25-year conditional use permit term instead of the Planning Commission's recommended 20 years, with a one-time automatic extension for 5 years if the project remains compliant. So the performance standard would read, a conditional use permit for a U.S. solar facility may be approved for a period not to exceed 25 years. Furthermore, if requested in writing by the U.S. solar facility owner or operator, a one-time extension to the underlying conditional use permit term shall be granted administratively by the zoning administrator, who shall be allowed to add additional conditions to the approval as deemed reasonable and necessary, with the following requirements: that such term extension A shall be granted only if the solar facility, upon the date that the initial conditional use permit term expires, is in conformance with the CUP development plan and stipulations and the solar facility agreement and these regulations. B shall commence upon the date of the expiration of the initial conditional use permit term, and C shall be a maximum length of 5 years. Any questions?
No questions, but this is Kelly Rast. I recommend we stay with the 20-year CUP because that is consistent with the CUPs that we do or timeframe in Johnson County. It also is consistent with what Edgerton has recommended and Douglas County adopted. And in my opinion, these solar companies seem very positive about no issues. It's a great thing. There's no reason that they just can't make this work within the 20-year CUP recommendations.
Any other comments on the 20-year?
Jim Neese, I've got a question. Would you give me, 1, 2, 3, 4, the reasons that the staff recommended 25 years as opposed to 20? But before you do that, all that I've looked at from the consultant and even from some of your own staff's comments to us that planning for the future is like planning the weather. I heard somebody say that this last week. And the longer you go, the harder it is to plan. And would you give me why you deviated? And I know that other facilities, are longer, and this consultant, some are longer and shorter. But would you give us the exact specific reasons why the staff recommended 20 over 25? I know on your overhead, you mentioned finance. So go ahead.
Denise, and just, I'll kind of answer it in a couple different ways. You're correct. When we review sorry, can you hear me? Sorry, I need to get closer. J. Leipzig Planning Department, I'll answer the question in a couple of different ways. You're starting from the 20-year term. 20 years is our typical planning threshold and planning envelope when we look at our future comp plan. 20 years is always the typical period of time that we are talking about when we talk about comprehensive planning. That being said, that goes for typical for comp plan developments, zoning issues, that type of thing. 25 years in this case was seen as it's something. It's slightly longer than 20, but the industry, they do like to see a longer term on this. But frankly, in terms of planning for future development, 20 years is, and we've said that previously as well, 20 years is that's the envelope and the period of time that we look at for making land use decisions. Mr. Neese, although I will say we've had some variance there in terms of terms of conditional use permits. We have 20 years is several conditional use permits that are for a period of 20 years. We actually have one or two that I can think of that are 30 years. We have one that has a 40-year term for a structure. So
where is that?
That is out in the DeSoto area, I believe. I don't have the exact address, but it's out in DeSoto. It's actually a solar facility with a 40-year term that was approved, I believe, a couple of years ago, if I recall.
Commissioner Neese, this is Sean Penley, planning staff. I'll add to what Mr. Leipzig indicated. There are several other CUP applications that have been approved with longer terms, including communications facilities. So there's been at least 3 or 4 cell towers in the county that have been approved with 25-year terms. We understand that that's not specifically written that way in the regulations, but that has been a common approval for those types of capital type facilities for these private projects. So there are other examples. So that was another consideration we looked at. And as you had indicated, we did do research with other jurisdictions, and the consultant indicated most other jurisdictions have either no term limit or a longer term than a 20-year term.
When you say most, there's 1,000 of them. So you're saying majority of the 1,000, most of them, or
most other jurisdictions do not have a term limit on the CUP.
are most of them more than 1,000 acres?
I don't know the details for the size the comparison, but most they don't have a term. Typically,
No
approval.
All right, then let me ask you this: what was the consultant? You guys hired a consultant, and one of the county commissioners said he was 3 years behind or something, and I couldn't quite figure that out. But you tell me what the consultant felt about the 20 years for Johnson County? And I want to make that distinction. It's real easy to say, there are others, there are others, there are others. I'm not going to do this, but I could read you the 5 that present potential applicants got going now that are large facilities. And they're not even close to anything like Overland Park or Kansas City or in counties that are probably going to be built out in the next 40 years. So where are you coming from on that? What did the consultant say?
Well, to the specific question, what did the consultant recommend as far as the terms in their comparison? In their experience, the consultant said that they were not familiar with other jurisdictions that had term limits. That's what the consultant informed us. So most other jurisdictions, not taking into context the size of the facility, but for utility scale solar facilities, most other jurisdictions do not have a term limit. For a city.
During the working session, what did the consultant say to you and the county commissioners about what he felt was appropriate for Johnson County?
I don't recall the consultant having a direct recommendation for a term limit for Johnson County. I don't recall any specific.
Well, I'll tell you what he said. He said it 3 different times, 3 different places, that it is common to have large facilities for longer than 20 years, sometimes in perpetuity. But he felt that for Johnson County, the 2000 of the 20 years was appropriate. And he said it 3 different times. And I kind of got the feeling that he wasn't in great favor with you guys, but that's what he said. And I asked a potential applicant to give me some specifics that are similar to Johnson County. And I asked the staff that several times, and I've never really gotten that. You know, when I look, the larger trend may be bigger, but you have to look at the trend of where it is. And the trends that I'm looking at and what Nextera are working on, and hopefully they'll get finished, are not comparable to Johnson County in an area that's going to probably be built out in the next few years. So,
Commissioner Neese, I'd like to echo what you're saying, and I can tell you I have the notes from our April 27th meeting, and you're right. There was many times that she actually said, I can tell you I was very fascinated to learn more about Johnson County and the fact that the towns and the cities keep annexing more land. That does not happen in Virginia. So we've tried to come up with some criteria to help control and allow for that fast growth. It was asked for any comparisons drawn. Mr. Penley said that he would try and get some comparisons that were equivalent with a fast growing county. We have yet to receive any of that information. So yes, this has been something that's been asked about since April of last year to get something. I will tell you, we are, and everybody needs to really think about this. If you look at what's going on, this is industry standard. This is an example of industry standard with over 1,000 acres. This is industry standard. This is industry standard. This is industry standard. They're out in the desert. They're nowhere near residents. So sure, it makes sense not to have these regulations. So we're talking about this with many, many homes and residents and in a fast growing county. 4 of the fastest growing cities in Kansas reside in Johnson County. So there is a lot to take pause in consideration of what is going to happen. All the cities are very concerned about that. They have all voiced it. I'm going to, and if you start really looking at the trends, the industry standards now, this is a great article on Reuters from April of this year. And it talks about how the large scale utilities are starting to come into the rural communities, and they are being fought hand over fist, and they are losing because of all the same issues that we have concerns with. And so I think we need to be very careful. And like I said, the Spotsylvania solar farm, that is probably most comparable to us. We need to look at what they did. They cleared trees, they cleared forest land. They have numerous problems. That is our comparative database, not this stuff, which is out in the middle of the desert. It doesn't matter. So there's a lot of, I'm not against solar, but anything that's done in the right place is a good thing. Things that are done a right thing in the wrong place is still wrong. And we need to look at what is actually going on in the industry, how it compares to our area. And there's a lot out there that is starting to come out that people are starting to say no. This article references quite a bit. I recommend maybe we can get it on, on the website so people can refer to it. But 103 localities nationwide have adopted policies to block or restrict development. More than 1.7 gigawatts proposed during permitting stage in 2021 were canceled, all for these same concerns that we are discussing tonight. So when we talk about industry standards, which I heard, that was probably the main thing I heard from the BOCC, it's not industry standard. Again, if you want to talk about this industry standard, then let's go someplace in Kansas and build a solar farm that represents this. If we're going to talk about this area, let's talk about, true industry standards, which there are some documents that are starting to come about. And we need to be really mindful of that. And, this same Reuters article, it mentions Kansas, and I, kudos to the Canoccis who were, quoted that, basically it's an opportunity to make some money from it. I appreciate their honesty. Our 6 children, 9 of them are farmers, or none of them are farmers, sorry, said in an interview, they'd probably get along better with Nextera than they would farming it. So I appreciate, and I'm all for capitalism, so I appreciate the honesty of the money factor, but we have to be mindful of what this is doing to our county. And 20 years is very mindful for a very fast growing county.
Jim Neese, I've got one other comment. On your presentation that you gave about the 20 years, you said bring into the effect financing. And was that a major factor of you saying 20 years? You didn't bring that up here, but it was on your display when you had the 3 different possibilities.
No, Mr. Neese, I think we had said that it's one of the when you look at, and it was brought up several times about these typical developments have longer terms. That might have been said as one of the reasons, but frankly, as I said before, the 20-year envelope that's typically what we look at in terms of planning for being able to predict future land uses, that type of thing. And then so we're thinking longer than that at 25 years, but the recommendation of this body was for 20 years.
Okay.
Was the time that was requested for the 20-year term.
And I just want to say one other thing. I'm real proud of this group is when we first started looking at this, we mostly look at land usage. That's what we really looked at. So in this particular case, we had to weigh between land usage and a great thing called solar energy. And I think the Planning Commission weighed all of the assets and liabilities of both sides and came up with a very, very respectful working situation with what we recommended to the county commissioners. The county commissioner's recommendation now is 2,500 acres, and I believe there was was there a amendment to go up to 3,000? So tell me what the recommendation from the county is.
Sean Penley, County
from the
BOCC.
BOCC.
This current directive that we're talking about is the request for the 25-year conditional use permit. Directive number 5 will talk about the maximum area. As the BOCC requested, it was 2,000 acres to be considered for discussion.
I'm sorry, I said acres. I meant for 20 years. 20 years. So we have a waiver of. Didn't we have a waiver on our 20 years?
No, as it was requested by the board to consider was for a one-time automatic extension of 5 years if the project remains compliant. That's what the board requested the Planning Commission to consider.
So if we have 20 years, then there can be a waiver if they come before us for 20 years and they can ask for a 5-year waiver. Is that what
it would be an automatic, as it's requested by the board to consider, it would be an automatic extension.
Well, that's 25 years then.
Well, it'd be a 30-year.
It'd be a 30 years, yeah.
30-year, as it was requested by the board to consider. But as you have discussed, there's a motion currently for keeping it as a 20-year CUP, as you've discussed.
Well, in that case, I'd like to make a motion to accept this the way it is for 20 years with a waiver of 5 years. That means that, am I saying that right? That means that we could stay with what we are, allowing a 5-year
Extension,
waiver.
Not waiver.
It'd be an extension, and I think you
I'm not
would either
saying
need to ask
automatic.
for a friendly amendment to Commissioner Rast's initial amendment, or we vote on the 20-year. I guess that'd be a question for Commissioner Rast.
Oh, I'm fine with an extension of the 5 years at that point. I mean, it's only logical and reasonable that we do not offer a CUP that goes further than what our own planning staff and commission plans for in our county.
So a point, Peg Trent, Chief Counsel, for a point of clarification. So would there be a friendly withdrawal of the initial motion to go forward with the motion of James Neese, as to making it 20 years with an extension of 5 years?
Waiver.
And if the second agrees with that, withdraw of that initial motion, whoever that was. Who is
Kelly Rast, I'll withdraw and support Commissioner Neese' motion.
And who is the second on your motion? Do you recall?
I second it too.
Okay, we had to, it was John.
There was a withdrawal by
okay.
Kelly
You
Rast.
agreed
I
to the
withdraw
withdrawal.
by Commissioner Neese, yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, the new motion that has been made and seconded, does everybody understand? Any questions on that? 20?
Roger Mason, I got a question. So what we have on the floor is a motion to go with a 20-year CUP with an automatic 5 if they are in compliance.
That's
That is
correct. That's what I understand.
Is it appropriate to ask a question at this point?
Sure.
Question is, what if they're out of compliance under the 20 years? What's our enforcement possibilities at that point? It's at year 17, they come out of compliance. What happens?
This is Sean Penley, planning staff. What I would suggest is that at that time, if for whatever reason there was anything that was not compliant, then it would not be able to be renewed. This is something that I think staff would have to look at. We've had other CUPs in the past. You may be familiar with either inspections or every 5 years we do a checkup on it. I think what would happen is at the end of the term of the 20 years, staff would provide a report and we'd probably go through the hearing. If for whatever reason the CUP or that project had any violations or anything was in non-compliance, that would not be automatically renewed, and we'd have to call a public hearing for a renewal of a CUP, or potentially could be a revocation of a CUP if there was another problem.
My real question, Roger Mason here, my real question is, if this happens in year 16, 17, do they continue to have the right to operate out of compliance until 20 before they get any enforcement action? Or how does that work?
No, Sean Penley, planning staff. I think what would happen if for any reason within the 20-year CUP, let's say if it's approved for 20 years, if for whatever reason there was any compliance issues, that would be handled through enforcement. If there was not compliance with that enforcement of the zoning enforcement, that would be cause for potential revocation of the CUP. We'd call a public hearing and go through the process. But we would have measures in first to get compliance with the applicant to bring those in the remedies to comply.
Roger Mason again, and those remedies would be handled in your actual CUP itself, so that would be clear that what would happen if you're out of compliance.
I believe so. There'd be specific stipulations for enforcement. Yes.
Okay, does everybody understand what this new motion is? And there are no further questions? We can take roll.
Terry Atwell.
Terry Atwell, I will support the 20 years with the 5-year extension. My reasoning is because our Southwest Consolidated Zoning Board has done, multiple long-term CUPs. I believe one being a 30, and in 2018, we actually had a solar conditional use permit that was for 25 years that got approved. So I will support this one.
Michael Levin,
I'll vote yes and support this for the same reasons I initially voted on it back when we did it before. Specifically, I had spoken to planning staff and asked a question of if somebody is in compliance, have they ever had somebody not get an extension? And I believe at the time, the answer was that they did not know of any time where if the vendor or company is in compliance, they would not get the extension. So I thought it was very fair.
George Lund,
I would vote in favor. I think it will work.
Dave Johns,
I'll vote in favor, and I want to make sure it's, my reason is this way. I feel that this is the right way, and it was the right way when we voted December 14th. I want them to make sure they read. So I'm going to use some of the technology or verbatim. So with the verbatim transcript of proceedings of the Planning Commission and Commissioner Rast reasons on this date. So they can make sure that they read her reasons.
Lindsay Grisay is absent. Mark Huggins is absent. Jim Neese. Yes.
Jim Neese, I'm in favor. And weighing pros and cons of what's happening in our county today, and and solar energy is important. I think that if you're going to do it, 20 years with that extension is important. Longer than that, I think it gets so far out of planning, like recommended maybe that was sent down to us for 25 years, 30 years. Well, in 30 years, my concern is that when most of the people in the room aren't going to be here to have a comment, that there's going to be some 35-year-old councilman in Gardner and Edgerton and the mayor down there say, what in the world these people do 35, 40 years ago that we can't build an apartment complex out here. So that's a long answer to my reason, but that's probably reality.
Kelly Rast,
I'm in favor of it, and same reasons as why I was in favor of the 20 years in the first place. It's only logical and reasonable to stay within our planning timeframes with a very fast-growing county, and for the size and extent of this project, and also in the nature of seeing some of the things not going so well in the industry.
Randy Downing,
I vote no. I think the people who are going to build this facility will have shareholders to report to. I think they're going to be more concerned about staying in compliance than anyone else. I mean, I've worked for Fortune 500 companies for 40 years, and believe me, no one goes into this thing saying, let's just trail it out for 15 years and we'll just walk away from it. I mean, I think this is a substantial project, and I think people are in it for the long haul.
Randy Hutchins is absent. Chris Iliff is absent. Roger Mason.
I'll support this, and I believe it gets us in closer compliance and unison with the other conditional use permit regulations.
We have 7 yes.
The motion is approved. Everyone understand what it is? I think we do, and we have no more questions. We can go to Directive 5.
Directive 5, a maximum project area of 2,000 acres instead of the Planning Commission's recommended 1,000 acre, including a waiver option. So the new text reads, the minimum project area of a utility scale solar facility shall be more than 10 acres in size, and the maximum project area shall not exceed 2,000 acres. And the waiver is written as, in the event that an applicant desires to deviate from the above maximum project area requirement, the application may only be approved if findings are made by the Board of County Commissioners that A, due to the circumstances surrounding the application, it would be unreasonable to require such a maximum project area, or B, it would be reasonable to allow a larger project area. Example, it may be reasonable to increase the project area allowed if located within a planned employment center district or within a brownfield site such as the former Sunflower Army ammunition plant. The applicant shall submit written information to the Board of County Commissioners indicating the circumstances which are believed to necessitate the need for a deviation from the maximum project area requirement. Any questions?
Are there any questions?
Jim Neese, I've got a question. Was real concerned by some of the staff's recommendation or comments to the county commissioners and at not only the meeting of the whole, but the public hearing. And my concern is the presentation was that Edgerton wanted 3 miles. By the way, they had to ask the question. It wasn't presented very strongly what the cities were looking at. It was almost a non-discussion. And the comment from staff is that there was a meeting between Gardner, whose letter, the comment that I got on Gardner's letter was on the back of another copy. I couldn't even hardly read it. And I just got a copy of a new letter that they requested that their original comments be stationary. So I'm not going to read what the staff said to county commissioners or what was said in open hearing of the whole, but it was portrayed as if Gardner really didn't have they were in general agreement of the 2 miles and the situation. And that's not the case. And I want to say here and now that I think the staff at some point in time should state to county commissioners, and if you want me to read it, I will, that they either misspoke, they misunderstood, because the county commissioners heard from staff that Gardner was pretty much okay with the 2 miles in the 20 years. And
Mr. Chairman, this is Peg Trent, Chief Counsel. So is that at this point, moving forward, we're here tonight to discuss whether you want to go forward with this in stating your reasons why. And that can be included that you've made it multiple times, occasions that you are saying staff misspoke. At this point, moving forward, that's noted on the record, and we're here for the discussion on this item now.
With all due respect, I've been doing this for 42 years, and this is probably the most important thing that we've heard in the 42 years that I've been on boards in this county. Okay. And I do respect your comments to me, but the reason I'm saying this is because I'm going to ask the question here about the 2,000 acres and what interest they took in the letter that came from the city of Gardner, which just rewrote another letter. So with all due respect, I take what you said to heart, but so be it. So my question to you is this: the 2,000 acres, which was recommended against from the city of Gardner and the city of Edgerton, along with the 2 miles, by the way, 3 miles, what kind of consideration did you take when you went to 2,000 acres? Because in effect, and you tell me if I'm wrong, when you have 2,000 acres, there's not going to be any apartments, homes, development, or anything in that 2,000. And I'm saying 2,000 acres now. It's 2,500 acres. It's 4 square miles. Okay. And so I want to kind of back up here and ask the question where you guys are coming from on this, because I really can't understand it.
Sean Penley, planning staff. Okay, for the request and the question, I think Commissioner Neese, you asked about staff's justification or explanation why the change from 1,000 to 2,000 acres. That was something that was obviously considered with all of the discussion, proposals, comments. We are aware of the initial comments from the city of Gardner, the city of Edgerton, and the city of Olathe. City of Edgerton did have specific comments regarding size. I do believe that the initial letter from the city of Gardner did indicate that they would not recommend over 1,000 acres. The discussion, I believe, that transpired at the Board of County Commissioners meeting on April 4th, I think I do recall mentioning a conversation we had in a meeting, in a Zoom meeting following the previous recommendation from the Planning Commission, talking about some of the changes, where we talked about changes in the buffers from the city's maximum area. I recall a specific discussion about the buffer and how they didn't have any concerns with the 1.5 mile buffer. That's what I recall. I don't recall any specific conversation or comments from the city about whether they were set on a maximum of 1,000 acres. Regardless, you are correct. The city of Gardner has submitted a letter that is included in your packet where they do indicate, this letter dated May 4th, 2022, City of Gardner feels that the previously proposed maximum project area of 1,000 acres is sufficient for any future utility scale solar facility in southwestern Johnson County. And that is correct. That is the city's position on the maximum project area of the solar facility.
Mr. Neese, Jay Leipzig, I'd be happy to kind of further elaborate on this issue, because you and I have talked about this, and I've stated this previously as well. We had, when staff had made an initial recommendation back, I think this goes back in like June of 21, June or July, we had originally recommended 1,000 acres, but tied to that 1,000 acres in our determination at that point, we weren't looking at a 70% coverage and some of the other issues, other requirements with setbacks. That was strictly this kind of an evolution of a process and how all of these regulations are designed to fit together. So originally we were thinking 1,000 acres, not looking at a 70% coverage area, different setbacks. And so when staff then came back and we're looking at possibly 2,000 acres with a 70% coverage, then it begins to, so that's why that difference. And then, so in making that comparison, that's really, in my mind, anyway, that was kind of the different factors, is we're looking strictly at that, the actual coverage of solar panels, not looking at the setbacks, not looking at the coverage percentages, all of the other things that go along with it. And that is the difference.
Jay, I don't want to interrupt you, but let me just say this. That's not my comment, and I'm going to drop this. Okay. You read the minutes. I've watched the video 4 or 5 times. The question was from a member of the OCC is, what are they asking? And the comment pretty much was, they're in general agreement with discussions that we had with their staff and so on and so forth. And I find no evidence that ever happened. I know they haven't come off the 2 miles and they haven't come off the 1,000 acres. So my point to you is, sir, is that I listened to it and then I watched it, that there was a misrepresentation unintentionally to the county commissioners of what the city of Gardner, which is one of the 2 cities that's going to be impacted by this, what their feelings on these 2 issues were about the 2 miles and about the size. Enough said. Anyway.
I have some clarification information. This is Karen Miller. In the memo from planning staff to the Board of County Commissioners dated February 22nd, 2022, that's for the Committee of the Whole to consider. On page 2, number 4, distance from cities, staff indicates that the draft regulations include a minimum distance requirement from cities to accommodate future growth. Some of the cities are requesting specific buffers to match their future growth areas. Edgerton requests 3 miles, Gardner requests 2 miles, and Overland Park requests applying regulation. on a watershed basis, which is the extent of a sewer district, and requests omission of utility scale solar facilities from the Blue River watershed, which is their future sewer and growth area.
Okay, Jim Neese, I didn't want to read this, but I'm gonna, because I want to make my point, and then I'm going to shut up here. Question was asked about Edgerton and the 2 miles. And the county, and I think it was Ms. O'Hara asked a question, and this is what was said. This is from the minutes that I've got, and this is right off the video, about 12 minutes and 45 seconds. When we met with them, we presented and showed that we were recommending up to 1.5 miles, and they generally were agreeable with that. Now, if I ask you that question, and you told that to me, I would think Gardner's okay with it. Okay? But that was all that was said. Nobody said, no, that's not the case. They want 2 miles. And that's not the only situation that this came up. Okay? And the gentleman that was the consultant also said, and it was not presented to the county commissioner, that 2 miles and 2 miles and 1,000 acres was appropriate for Johnson County, and that came from the consultant. So I'm going to be quiet now, but this is an important thing, Counselor, and it's worth discussing and everything that's going on, because when I heard the presentation at the public hearing, I felt like the train had left the track. So anyway, enough said. So,
Chairman, this is Chief Counsel Peg Trent. We can make sure that when you do vote and whatever you decide to do, that you make it known for the record that the reason you're voting that way is because of the clarification as to what the position were of the joining cities, and making sure the commissioners know. I'm just speaking out because at this point, I don't think we're here to attack staff, but more to move forward with it. And I understand your point of clarification, but we want to make sure that moving forward, we're going forward with the motion.
with all due respect, I'm not attacking the staff, Jim Neese. Okay, I'm bringing up a point that came in public hearing, and I feel like it should be brought up because it was part of the record.
Duly noted and duly noted. Duly noted, and it should be made part of the record.
This is Kelly Rast. I make a motion that we maintain the 1,000-acre max project area. And these are my reasons why. Number one, I agree transparency is hugely important, and transparency has gone off the track on a few times. I'm going to clarify a few things. On April 27th, that was my first meeting, and I'm talking 2021. So these are the minutes from the April 27th. And like I said, this was my first time being a part of this. So the first two meetings were quite interesting in my opinion. So this is Mrs. Nelson speaking, and she stated, so talking through all of these ideas with your staff, we came up with the recommendation that the utility scale solar facilities would be greater than 10 acres, which is our basic definition, but up to 1,000 acres. We talked about that on both of the last calls. Everybody seemed somewhat comfortable with 1,000-acre limit. That would be about 100 megawatts, and it would probably have about 600 acres actually under panel. At this time, at this meeting, 1,000 acres is what everybody was discussing. Everybody that was going to be the maximum. This is, once again, April 27th, 2021. And at this time, too, they were also talking about 65% panel coverage, and also more aggressive setbacks. So that's one thing, I'm just clarifying that's what took place on April 27th. And this was before I was even there. So staff had already determined with, I guess, conversations, I don't know who, but it is stated in the minutes that you guys had already decided 1,000 max was appropriate. The other things I want to bring up is based off of our consultant, once again, that I'm assuming taxpayers paid good money for. Their number one thing is that they talk about is location and land usage. So look, and here's one of their little things. Locations to avoid: growth areas, prime farmland, ecological sensitive sites, historical sites, adjacent residences or businesses. I mean, this is our consultant. The location of the utilities scale solar facility is the single most important factor in evaluating an application. Once again, they recommend solar facilities can be appropriately located in areas where they are difficult to detect. The prior use of the land has been marginal, and there's no designated future use specified. Not in growth areas, not on prime farmland, not near recreational, historical, once again. They recommend brownfield areas. So a lot of what we all felt is basically information that we discussed with staff early on, and the Berkeley group, who they were brought in as our consultant. I feel like their recommendations are still kind of spot on. Again, as long as we're not talking about this. We do this, I'm all for it. Sign me up. You got my vote. Okay. We're not talking about that. We're talking about a lot of this. To review all the cities, the city of Gardner wants 1,000-acre MAC. Edgerton, less than 2,000 acres. Overland Park sent in a letter, less than 2,000 acres, and exclude the Blue River and the Headwaters watershed, like Mrs. Miller said. Douglas County adopted 1,000-acre max. What our board is presenting is right on target. I mean, it's on target with what staff early on had conversations with, had decided on, we decided on. The thing that is quite concerning though, so that was the first meeting that was discussed. And again, it was also, we also say if we're going to set a parameter that says maximum size for a solar facility is 1,000 acres. It also talked about not doing side by side because you don't want to get to 2,000 acres. That would look like 2,000 acres. So there's a lot of very specific information about watching the size of this. So then let's go to, I believe, June 22nd, minutes from the June 22nd meeting. Oh, wait, let me step back. Okay, this meeting, and again, I was kind of new, so I was paying attention and I was like, whoa, okay. It was all discussed. Everybody seemed to be on the same page. And then all of a sudden into public comments is the first time, from what I understand, and it even says it, that we are going to hear from John Peterson and Billy Wilkins. So this is the first time that they have come on board. So I'd like to just repeat a few of the things that they have said. They obviously talk about NextEra, pat themselves on the back with who they are in NextEra. And one of the things that's a little bit concerning is that, well, I'm not going to go into that. I'll skip that. We'll keep it close. They also said that we're also very pleased to report, because we all know, if not welcomed by the landowners in the county, that we really essentially, through these long-term lease processes that we've described, we become partners with. And if we're not welcomed by them, we don't have anything to talk about. They do acknowledge that they have gotten long-term lease of approximately 2,000 acres with some farmers. Well, I think at this point, we've all learned that's basically one family, basically because they're the one citizens in this area that has the 1,800. I spent 3 hours with them one afternoon and learned quite a bit, so. Okay, if 1,800, if I misspeak on that, that's whole fine. You correct me. I think the point is there's quite a lot of citizens out in that area that are against this. And NextEra's own words are, if they're not welcomed by the citizens, they don't want to be here. So, I mean, I'm just reading, these are their words. It also, at one point, it was discussed that, that they wanted to do neighborhood meetings. And I think there's been some transparency issues of that not taking place in the past, where the citizens weren't brought on board early. So anyway, so in part of Mr. Peterson's testament or his minutes, according to his minutes. Two quick issues, though, that are fundamentally important to having a successful project and for us to move forward. One is the cap of 1,000 acres. So that was stated that they had, that was a deal breaker. So to artificially cap a project at 1,000 acres, we're not going to get the state of the art, the utility grade type facility that we hope Johnson County wants to contribute to this overall effort. I want to put size in some perspective just for a minute. And then it says dash 2,000 acres. So then now we flash forward to the next meeting. And I found this quite interesting because this was the very first time, me being a commissioner, that all of a sudden the acres, the staff recommended at that meeting that we were now going from 1,000 to 2,000. And I even asked, how did we go from 1,000 to 2,000 acres? And the last minutes clearly shows staff was on board and thought 1,000 acres was appropriate for our area. Even the Berkeley consultant even said that, due to the uniqueness of Johnson County being fast growing, you may decide this isn't appropriate, but everything always went back to 1,000 acre max. And then out of the blue, the first thing that is changed on our agenda is that it's gone from 1,000 to 2,000 acres. And really the only explanation is, well, that's industry standard. Okay, once again, industry standard. But I think, I don't know, I'll just leave it there as far as these are the official minutes and recordings of those 2 minutes. That is what transpired within the course of one meeting when Nextera stepped in and said 1,000 acre cap wouldn't work for them. The very next meeting, it was already changed. Planning Commission didn't even say anything. It was changed by staff, to jump it to 2,000. So based on all the research I have done, I still make a motion that we keep it at 1,000 acres. That is consistent with what all the cities around us and the other counties around us have recommended. And I will offer a waiver only for areas like a brownfield site.
Terry Atwell, I know I'm coming to this way late, so I just have a couple of questions to see if I couldn't find the answers anywhere.
Dave John, should I second that? Then we can have discussion. So I'll second her motion.
Thank you. Do we know how many acres that it requires to make it the investment in the infrastructure sustainable?
Kelly Ross, personally, that's not important. We're here for the county and our citizens. We're not here to try and figure out what works for a corporation. Remember, we're not even supposed.
Kelly, I'm not asking for a corporation. I'm asking for myself.
I don't know. I'm here.
That's why I'm asking the staff.
Jim Neese, I can tell you, you looked on Nextera's website.
I have not been on their
They
website.
go on there. It's a very good website. They have 2 categories of their particular installations, kind of large ones and universal size. They have lots of them in Florida.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, we don't have to go any.
And I'm just telling you,
If the
they
staff
got,
doesn't
and
know,
they're
the
like
staff
70,
doesn't know.
they're like less than 100 acres. They're all over the place. I got a list here because I looked them all up and went on the GPS and saw where they are. They have many, many, many.
I had like 3 months to read, so.
Okay, so I'm telling you that from my research, looking at the installations in the GPS, they have many, many more that are under, I'm going to make a general 500 to 1,000 acres than they do over that. Okay, and their website right now has 5 larger units going. The last time I looked at it, and they're all good size units, and they're not in the county like we are here. So.
Okay, and then for staff, do you guys cap any other, industry in acres, like warehouses, industrial parks?
Sean Penley, planning staff. There are no other land uses that I'm aware of in our regulations where we have maximum size limits for a development project. But of course, this utility scale solar is completely unique use. And so
Okay.
that's why I think staff recommended for this use.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Jay Leipzig, I just want to make a brief comment as well about reference to some of the comments were made in terms of staff with 1,000 acres versus 2,000 acres. Originally, when we, with the recommendation of 1,000 acres, that was a very conservative approach. And I still stand by my comments about kind of looking at something, kind of educating ourselves about it. We were told by our consultant as well that the trend, the future trend for these projects is they are larger, they're growing. And so to be proactive, and if we're looking at something, that's but these regulations, development of these regulations, we want to have something that reflects the current trends, not something that has happened in the past. So that's part of what staff was thinking about when we made that provision for going up to 2,000 acres. I assure you, it had nothing to do with comments that were made by NextEra or other business interests. It was based strictly upon recommendation of our consultant, and also as we begin to educate ourselves more about some of the larger solar facilities and throughout the country, to try to do additional research on that matter.
Thank you. Okay, we do have a motion and a second.
I have Dave Johns. I have a comment. I think when it just, with all due respect to the Board of County Commissioners, the Planning Commission is made up of 9 unincorporated and 3 incorporated. The Planning Board of County Commissioners is essentially, as I look at maps, primarily 6 incorporated, one that my county or number 6 is made up the unincorporated. And so I understand the way the rules are, and sometimes you have to live with the way the county makes their, the politics and how it's voted on. But look at what this board, I'm talking to the Board of County Commissioners as they read these notes. Look at this board. This is made up primarily of the people out there in Big 6. And take what we're voting on and spending a year on, and this is probably the 10th meeting on, and our time, and look at it. When I looked at the notes from going from 1,000 to 2,000 on April 4th, it just all of a sudden, there wasn't much conversation at all, except for, I'm going to make a motion. And it was like, I, no, send it back. And no matter what, it's just not the right thing to do. That's all.
Chief Counsel, is there a motion on the floor, and are you going to proceed to a vote now so people could indicate their reasons for voting one way or another?
Denise, I might like to make an amendment.
Okay.
You love me, don't you?
No, I'm just trying to keep us on track so we
Yeah,
can
I'd
get
like
through all of the
to vote.
amendments.
Okay.
I'd like to go ahead and proceed with the vote.
I'm thinking about making an amendment here, and I need to ask you this, Jay. During the committee meeting of the whole, I'm not going to read you what you said because they, in the minutes, admitted what you said about the size. And you said, in effect, that you commented on the 1,000 acres, and you thought that it might be amenable to have a waiver of 500 acres. Okay? You said that, I'm not going to read it to you, but that's in effect what you said. So at that meeting, you kind of gave an indication that a 500-acre waiver might be something that would be kind of in the middle. I think the 4 square mile deal, which is what you've got, is a tremendous amount of ground. And the chairman asked a question, or somebody asked a question, I think it was a chairman, is that's a 70% coverage. And therefore, if you have 1,000 acres, you only have 700 acres that you're going to have panels on. And the follow-up comment to that, I think, was that 1,000 acres is like a wall around it. Okay. But to give the cities some kind of leeway and to maybe give a little bit here is to have 1,000 acres with a 500 acre waiver. Now, if you do that, okay, then the cities would have, or the zoning boards would have a look-see and a real hard discussion of whether or not it ought to go. My feeling is, like I said earlier, the trains left the tracks and all the commissioners from the city or something, they're already cannibalized in their area, and we're down here trying to protect the potential growth of the cities. So I'm going to make a motion. Hey, I'm going to make a.
We have a motion on the floor.
I'm not going to make a motion, but I'm going to make an amendment to the motion that that we give the 1,000 acres with a waiver. That means that they'd have to vote on it, right? Of 500 acres. That takes it up to 1,500 acres. And if you divide 640 into 1,500 acres, that's still a lot of ground. Because I believe if you don't do that, the county commissioners are going to go with 3,000 acres. I mean, that's where it's going, in my opinion. So that's my amendment. If I don't get a second, I don't get a second. But I think that's trying to do something, and then that puts back on the zoning boards at the time that an application would come in of whether or not they feel from the arguments from the cities. We know the city's arguments is going to be against that, but it's going to be the local zoning boards in our area that are going to have to make that decision. So that's and if I don't get a second, I don't get a second.
I don't hear a second.
Well, that call for it. Got to call for it.
Do I hear a second on that last? No, I do not.
Okay.
We're going to vote on the first one, and we're ready to vote.
Carrie Atwell,
I'm going to vote no. I just don't feel like I have enough back information, and I really want to try to be fair across the board. So,
Michael Levin,
I'm going to vote yes to the motion. I do want to state that I started on this commission back around May of last year and kind of walked headfirst into this. And, initially I had actually voted for the 2,000 acres. And in the November meeting, I adjusted my posture. And I did that for a number of reasons. I voted on the 1,000 acres. The first one being, obviously, as new information became available and provided my understanding of how utility grade solar facilities function and how they're developed and enhanced. There was also as we all know, a tremendous amount of public comment made by local citizens. I took their comments, both pro and con, into consideration. Also noted per the recorded meeting minutes, on multiple occasions, I inquired as to Douglas County's acre cap. This was because I was trying to truly seek out a win-win situation or scenario for everyone. It was brought up on several occasions that a combined 2,000 acres total was needed to make the development profitable, as Terry was asking earlier. So my thought process was rather simple of if Douglas County and Johnson County both provided 1,000 acres each, that was the 2,000 acres needed by the company. And by doing this, those who choose to use their lands for this purpose could also do so with the development without overtaking the entire landscape. I would also like to note that I was not the only commissioner who changed their posture on the November 16th meeting. In previous votes related to this topic, the commission split with members on both sides of the proposed motion. When the motion was made to reduce the project cap per the meeting minutes, the motion passed unanimously, therefore clearly demonstrating other commissioners also felt a change in direction was needed and appropriate.
George Lund,
No, I will stick with the 2,000.
Dave Johns,
I vote yes to the 1,000. And the reason I've been yes the whole time. The other reasons is that when you look at the notes in the minutes that were given to the Board of County Commissioners, it's repeated by our consultant that Johnson County paid 1,000, I think I counted 5 times where he mentioned 1,000. And
Lindsay Grisay is absent. Mark Huggins is absent. Jim Neese.
I'll vote in favor of this. My reason is a negative one's against the 4 square miles. I would hope that the staff would give a map to the county commissioners that they gave us and showed 1980 and 2018. I'd take into consideration the growth at the cities. Edgerton is in the process of doing a comprehensive plan right now. And how can they do a comprehensive plan when potentially 4 square miles within a short distance of their city is going to be totally blocked out? And I would say to the county commissioners that are, to second what you said, if the county commissioners that are in the cities that have no chance of growth, you ask the county staff to look at that map in 1980. Overland Park's southern boundary was 143rd Street. So if you go 1.5 miles or 2 miles south of that, say 159th, and then go another mile south to 127th, and you take that line and go clear over the state line and take that out of the taxing ability and the growth ability. Shadow Glen, the golf course, 2,500 acres, that whole development. So if we would have had this proposal 30 years ago, and I used to ride a horse up there, that golf course and all the development that's around that would be not available. So that's a long answer. I always give long answers, but that's a reason that I would vote for 1,000 acres. And maybe the county commissioners will not go for 3,000 acres, but find something that's going to be reasonable for the cities that are going to try to grow in the area.
Kelly Rast.
I vote in favor because it's consistent with the city of Gardner that wanted 1,000-acre max. It's consistent with what Douglas County adopted at 1,000-acre max. It's consistent with both Edgerton and OP that recommends less than 2,000. It's also consistent with locations to avoid based off of our consultant regarding our area. And for all the reasons, I recommended 1,000 the first time.
Randy Downing.
I vote no. The 2 reasons. One, I bought gas this afternoon, and I think we're going to need all the power and other energy we're going to have in the years to come. And I don't want to see fracking. I don't want to see some wind farm or coal plant or something else coming here to make up what we need to secure energy. And secondly, I read in the paper that the Kansas legislature has approved hundreds of millions of dollars worth of incentives for some company to come into Kansas. And the speculation is it's going to go into the old sunflower plant. And that's going to take a lot of energy. And I just think that we should just be able to support whatever's coming. I mean, I understand about the land, but I think that as we look towards the future, we have to be prepared for it. And the future is not going to be other forms of energy. So
Randy Hutchins is absent. Chris Iliff is absent. Roger Mason.
Roger Mason, I vote yes. All things considered with our growth factor and the amount of ground that we're talking about taking out of commission and the timing with the length of the CUP, I think we should restrict the size a little bit.
The vote is 5 yes, 3 no.
Motion is approved. Let's move on to Directive 6.
Aaron Miller, Directive number 6, a 1.5 mile minimum distance from a city instead of the Planning Commission's recommended 2 miles, including a waiver option. So as written now, such solar solar facility shall be located greater than 1.5 miles from any city limits, with the exception of non-contiguous areas of a city, which are also known as islands, that are less than 80 acres in size, from which there shall not be such a requirement. Is there interest in reading the waiver? I'll just leave
Can
it
you
at
tell
that.
us what the Edgerton and what Gardner requested? And would you read Gardner's reply, please?
I've got it right here if you want.
Edgerton requests 3 miles, Gardner requests 2 miles, and Overland Park requests applying it by a watershed.
What was that?
Using a watershed.
Did you get any results from? Okay.
Any questions?
I have a question. Did the BOCC give any data points, rationale, reasons why they want it to go from 1 acre to 2 acres?
They're wanting you to look at that and give the reasons.
Yeah, thank you.
You know. If there are not any further comments, do I hear a motion?
I'm Kelly Rast again. I'll make a motion that we stick to the original 1 mile minimum distance from, or wait, 2 miles, sorry. And again, because that's consistent with, everybody around us, Douglas County, Overland Park, Edgerton, Gardner, and it's reasonable and logical with everything else.
Is there a second? No second?
I'll second.
Go ahead, Joe.
Jim.
There is a second. Any other questions on that? You understand the difference?
Okay. Jim Neese, did we have a waiver on that?
Mr. Chairman, or Mr. Neese, the 2 miles, yes, did have a waiver. And I guess that was my question for you all on that motion. Are you including the waiver?
What was our waiver?
So the waiver has been there, I'm not sure exactly, I think all along. The red in this text represents the December 14th recommendation. So the waiver was attached to the 2 mile recommendation. So it says, in the event that an applicant desires to deviate from this locational requirement, the application may only be approved if findings are made by the Board of County Commissioners that the proposed use is green is the suggested modification by staff. So the proposed use is consistent with or does not conflict with planned uses for the area. Example, city staff indicates in writing that the proposal is not anticipated in the future to hinder or prevent the proper growth and development of the city. The applicant shall submit written information to the Board of County Commissioners indicating the circumstances which are believed to necessitate the need for a deviation from the locational requirement. The applicant shall also submit a copy of the waiver request to cities within Commissioner Rast's would change that to within 2 miles of the project boundary for review, and city comments will be provided to the Board of County Commissioners as part of consideration for the waiver request.
Kelly Rast, I'm thinking that, if I remember right, we did the 2 miles project or from the city limits, but there was a waiver in case there was like certain areas that there was areas of land that it wouldn't be used for anything else, it wouldn't cause any issue. But it would be on a case by, I don't remember the wording, but case by case basis looked at the zoning board with the CUP. Does that sound familiar with what we're saying? So I am fine adding that part. It's just this waiver, I didn't seem like it was written the same way as the previous waiver. So that's why didn't add this waiver. I'm fine with the original waiver.
So the red is the original waiver. The only suggested change would be using the term consistent instead of in keeping with.
Okay, my bad. Then that's fine.
Do we have a motion?
That was the motion, and there was a second, Mr. Chairman. So there's a motion by Rast and a second by Neese.
We have a motion and a second. Let's vote.
Directive 6, Terry Atwell.
I'm going to vote the same as I did on the last one, and I'm voting no just because I'm coming in late in the game and I just don't have enough information on it.
Hey, Kelly, can I ask a question, Jim Neese? If asking that, well, I'm sorry I said that. Yeah, so are you voting no or are you abstaining? Are you voting no because you don't know? I'm just curious of your explanation. Are you abstaining or are you voting no? Okay.
Michael Levin.
I'm going to vote yes for this. Again, trying to find win-win scenarios. I believe 3 miles. I know that's what I think it was Edgerton asked a little bit on the far side. I think that 2 miles is a good compromise, a good win-win. So
George Lund.
Voting yes. It will work.
Okay. Dave Johns.
Voting yes, 2 miles. Again, I've voted this way consistently every single time. And it is also in keeping with what the cities are requesting for growth.
Lindsay Grisey is absent. Mark Huggins is absent. Jim Neese.
I'm voting yes. And the reason I'm voting for the 2 miles is I'm an old history teacher and I look at the maps that you gave us and I request that my answer be part of this map that you give each one of the county commissioners, please, when you approach this. And that shows the growth of the cities over a term that these things are going to be around and to restrict the growth of the cities, anything less than 2 miles is going to be not good. So
Kelly Rast.
I'm voting yes. This is reasonable and consistent with Gardner's recommendation of 2 miles. Edgerton wanted 3 miles, and Douglas County. So it's consistent with what we all agreed upon before.
Randy Downing.
No.
Randy Hutchins is absent. Chris Iliff is absent. Roger Mason.
Roger Mason, yes. Consistent with our previous discussions and requests of the cities adjoining the properties.
We have 6 yes votes, 2 no votes.
Motion carries. Let's proceed to Directive 7.
Aaron Miller, Directive 7, a consideration of adding CUP standards if necessary for impact on surrounding landowners due to the addition of transmission lines to service solar facilities. So the new text written is as follows. Review of conditional use permits, special land use considerations. As part of the review and consideration of the U.S. Solar Facility conditional use permit application, off-site impacts, including but not limited to those of private electrical power transmission lines and appurtenant equipment and structures connected to the U.S. Solar Facility may be reviewed for, among other things, land use compatibility issues, including but not limited to aesthetic impacts, plus detrimental impacts to the public health, safety, and general welfare, and also to neighboring landowners. Review of private electrical power transmission lines may also include, but shall not be limited to, consideration of proposed routes from the U.S. Solar Facility to a substation or other connection site and distance of the private electrical power transmission lines from right-of-way easements. Upon review of an off-site impact, the board may adopt conditions or restrictions as are deemed necessary and advisable for the protection of the public interest or to mitigate detrimental impacts to neighboring landowners. And also, I'll just mention, I didn't include it attached to this document, but I also made enhancements to already written requirements, making it clear that the The details regarding the transmission line route and connection to the grid are required as part of the application materials. I enhanced that requirement. And also I enhanced the fact that made sure that you showed the transmission line route. So I'll put that back. Are there any questions?
I have a question just because this is a little, Kelly Rass, a little bit on my wheelhouse and we didn't really discuss this in depth. So the transmission lines, would they be underground, above, both? Or like, what are we looking at? Are we looking at
Above ground.
above
Yeah, these
ground?
So what these, the request, Sean Penley, planning staff, what the board requested was that we consider a new development standard, essentially, new performance standards for what are considered the Gentile lines. These are the new overhead power lines that would be needed to be provided along with a utility scale solar facility if it's located far enough away from a substation and you needed to provide the power source back to the substation. In many cases, the utility scale solar facility will have to install new overhead power lines, those Gentile lines. So what the board asked is that we consider new standards that would address those lines that would go where the installation of new power lines are needed to support a utility scale solar facility. So these aren't necessarily for a public utility, it'd be for the private utility. So what we're adding in here is something that we would look at as part of the CUP application. We would require an applicant to provide the details for these new overhead power lines to support the utility scale.
So say
Karen,
if the
this is-
applicant needs, and I'm envisioning like big power lines that we kind of see in Stillwell. If they're going to run them like diagonally through a property's or a property owner's land, that would be something that they would say, this is what we need. Is that what we're talking about? Something like that, that has to be done in order for them to get their job done with the energy and transmit it?
Potentially, an applicant would need to obtain an easement with a utility easement.
I'm just making sure I'm thinking or visualizing what we're talking about correctly first.
So it would be, if where necessary, if it were far enough away from a substation, a provider would need to obtain a utility easement with a property owner. So we go through that process of obtaining that private utility easement to install the overhead power line.
Does
That could
eminent domain,
conceivably
but
be-
eminent domain does not fall into that because it's private.
We cannot use eminent domain for a utility scale solar facility. This would be a private utility easement, just as with any other utility easement that would be on a private property that would have to be with the consent of the landowner.
Okay,
So
so
that- But what
we're
saying-
basically just saying that this is going to be a review process to look at all of this kind of stuff in the future and take note of it.
Yes,
So we're doing-
Commissioner Jay Leipzig, the one thing I would say in a nutshell is that this requirement requires that to be shown on a site plan. So
Okay.
we're going to review it at the time of application and making sure that all of those lines are noted wherever they might be going into the solar facility.
Jim Neese. So, utility easements, the way I just recently read about what they're going to let some of these go to eminent domain. By the definition of utility easement, doesn't that mean that it can have eminent domain? I'm asking, I have no idea. I'm just asking.
These are not considered, Jay Leipzig, these are not considered a public utility.
Right.
So that there's no eminent domain would be, that would be provided this.
That's right. Sean Penley, planning staff. We also had a conversation with the Kansas Corporation Commission regarding this item. And they agreed that a private utility provider does not have the authority to use eminent domain for a utility easement for an overhead power line to support a utility scale solar. Yeah, certainly at some point in the future, maybe there could be changes in the laws and regulations that would address this. But at this time, the private utility could not use eminent domain. And I think that would require public approval anyway.
Correct. Any other comments? If not, do I hear a motion?
Roger Mason, I move we approve this directive, send it back to County Commission for approval.
Kelly Raff, second.
We have a motion and a second. No further comments. Let's vote.
One question, Dave Johns.
One question.
With my real estate background, I just want to make sure that I'm hearing this right. There's no way somebody can just say, I'm coming right down 56 highway. Somebody says yes, somebody says no. Just with the appraisal, appraisers, there's power lines. When you're showing properties, people will just not show a power line house. And it's just it's a stigma, whether it's good or bad, it's just a stigma behind it. So I'm just making sure that what we're approving here is regulations to stop anything like that without approval of the whole line of everyone agreeing to wherever they're going. And just it's stigma. I was showing houses the other day and we pulled up to a place near the intermodal and there's 50 feet high of dirt, a $1.3 million house. We pulled up and it was all nice and wooded and little babbling brook. And you pull up there and then there's 50 feet of dirt. And they were like, absolutely not. So it goes to the setback lines and things like this. I know I wasn't supposed to stay on Directive 7, but that I just want to make sure that what we're saying yes to is covering that kind of thing from not happening.
So this is Karen Miller. It is not written to prohibit that. It is saying that it can be reviewed as part of the conditional use permit process. And a conditional use permit it has certain criteria that you have to review it by. You know, is this in keeping with the character of the area and this and that? So basically it's just establishing, yes, you can look at it, you can consider it, but it ultimately it's a recommendation by the zoning board and it's a decision by the Board of County Commissioners.
Okay, no further questions. Let's vote.
Directive 7.
Mr. Chairman, Peg Trent, Chief Counsel, for clarification on the motion, is that you're voting to go with this recommended language that staff has proposed. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Directive 7, Terry Atwell.
I'll vote yes. I think it's important, to make sure we put protections in there.
Michael Levin.
I'll vote yes. I know we don't have a crystal ball, but my only concern really was eminent domain. And obviously at this point, that's not a concern. So I'll vote yes.
George Lund.
I vote yes. Consideration of adding CUP standards.
Dave Johns.
I'll vote yes to the answers I received.
Lindsay Grisey is absent. Mark Huggins is absent. Jim Neese.
Yes, it's doesn't include the eminent domain, so private enterprise, I'm all right with that.
Kelly Rast.
I vote yes, secondary to the review of CUP necessary.
Randy Downing.
Yes.
Randy Hutchins is absent. Chris Iliff is absent. Roger Mason.
Roger Mason votes yes.
Okay, we have 8 yes votes.
Okay. Directive 8.
Karen Miller, Directive 8, additional suggested clarifications, modifications, or corrections recommended by planning staff. So in the draft, all of the items that were directly requested by the Board of County Commissioners, I indicated by blue text. This Directive 8, Board of County Commissioners is saying, staff can, if while they're working on this, they see additional things to clarify or suggest that we should do so. Those are shown in green text. So this is recommendations by staff. I have only pulled up 4 within the draft May 10th amendments that I think are significant. The other ones, I, in my opinion, are smaller changes. But feel free, if when you've been reading the regulations, if there's anything that you would like to bring up and discuss and possibly remove. And these are all, keep in mind, only recommendations by staff and for your review and discussion. So I'm going through 4 that I thought were kind kind of major or new ideas. Directive 8A, revision of the project area waiver to parallel the maximum project area waiver. And I'll just read so the maximum project extent is one of the requirements of a U.S. solar facility. It shall be 4 square miles, which is 2,560 acres. The waiver I rewrote to read as follows. In the event that an applicant desires to deviate from this project extent requirement, the applicant may only be approved if findings are made by the Board of County Commissioners that due to the circumstances surrounding the application, it would be unreasonable to require a maximum project extent, such a maximum project extent, or B, it would be reasonable to allow a larger project extent. Example, it may be reasonable to increase the project extent allowed if located within a planned employment center district or within a brownfield site, such as the former Sunflower Army ammunition plant. However, in no case shall any portion of the project area be located more than 1/2 mile from the balance of the project area. The applicant shall submit written information to the Board of County Commissioners indicating the circumstances which are believed to necessitate the need for a deviation from the project extent requirement. And I'm just reading this, so I think that 1/2 mile should be 1/4 mile to match the definition of a solar facility. I just realized that should be 1/4 mile, shouldn't it?
Because what that was referring back to the definition we have to project extent.
Yes. I'm sorry, I just had a mental breakdown there. It's 1/2 mile is how it's written. So
1/2.
I've got a quick question, Karen.
Okay.
When you present this back to the county commissioners, are you going to then present our recommendations? Are you then going to represent your recommendations? Is it going to be like are you going to resell your ideas again? Are you going to go there and say, here's what they commissioned, but we still recommend this? I mean, is there going to be, are we going to have a competing argument there that you're presenting? If that's right, if that's the case, it doesn't quite seem right.
Mr. Chairman, if I could intervene on this, Peg Trent, Chief Counsel. When this gets presented back, it is the intent that there'll be 2 resolutions for the commissioners to look at, and it will have your recommendations of all that you're wanting. And then they'll have the one that was sent down to you, like the original May 10th that you're reviewing right now.
Right.
And so they will then vote on those particular resolutions.
Okay.
So that's what,
Will
how
there
it'll be
be
processed.
Will there be Jim Neese? I mean, will there be, will it be a presentation or will it be an argument in favor? I mean,
Mr. Chairman, Peg Trent, Chief Counsel, that is not before this planning commission. We haven't discussed that, but if they ask questions, the staff's going to do it. But clearly your recommendations of why you're doing and why you are making the amendments that you're doing, that will be communicated to the county commissioners.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, that's good luck on that deal.
Yeah.
So we, Mr. Chairman, Sean Penley, planning staff, as part of that Directive 8, we do have 8B, 8C, and 8D. If you like, we could go through each one of these. These, as Karen mentioned, these were staff recommended changes. We could give kind of a highlight of each, unless there's a specific question that any of the commissioners have on each one of these.
Well, that was my question. Are we now supposed to just consider 8A, or are we considering 8A, 8B, 8C, and 8D together?
Personally, I think we could give a quick overview of each one of the other ones. And if there's any requested questions or an amendment to any one of those, I think we could do that all as part of this one motion.
Would you? Yes, would you do that?
Chairman, Jay Leipzig, I would agree with that. I think that might be the easiest way, especially with the hour that we're at here. That might be the easiest way to do that.
Sure. Karen Miller, Directive 8B, modification that security fencing should be constructed with materials and a design that promotes the surrounding character. So we have a section regarding security fencing, and it's this green text in the middle. If utilized, security fencing should be constructed with materials and a design that promotes the surrounding character. Example, woven wire fencing with wooden posts may be more in keeping with the character of a rural area than chain link fencing with metal posts, as indicated in examples 2 and 3 below. So I inserted a photograph of the chain link fencing security fence, and then some examples of security fencing used that is more in keeping with a rural character. Here's 1 and here's 2. And then Directive 8C, modification that a stormwater performance bond may be required rather than shall be required. And this was, you had asked about this, Commissioner Neese, making sure that we address this. The recommendation is that the U.S. solar facility owner or operator shall be responsible for all stormwater facilities. So just up front, that is a requirement. A performance bond or other surety acceptable to the county may be required as deemed necessary to ensure compliance with the county's stormwater regulations and to correct non-functioning or inadequate stormwater controls or necessary maintenance, and may be a separate agreement or may be included as part of the U.S. Solar Facility Development Agreement. So the rationale behind taking it from shall be required to may be required is, keep in mind that this could also be like an 11-acre project with even a smaller acre of photovoltaic panels on it. So it was just a trying to be reasonable with the requirement, because probably not every project proposed would need to have surety posted.
This is Kelly Rast. Is it possible to add amendment that anything over 100 acres is required?
Yes, yes.
If we, or I'd like to hear what my fellow commissioners would think, like if we established a certain amount of acreage where anything below that, it can be taken in consideration. Anything above it, it is absolutely required up front. Anybody have any thoughts?
Yeah,
Mason.
that's a good question. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, Roger Mason here. I think that the staff could have some discretion because it might not just be acreage. It could also be geographical situations there. There could be other factors in the deal. And I think as the CUP works its way through the system, I think the staff can catch that.
Near streams and stuff. And grading.
Any other comments on that? Do you understand what we said?
Because Kelly Rast, because I do have questions, and that kind of brings us to like Douglas County in their recommendations. They even brought up things like the grading, limitations on the the grading not to exceed 5% unless for proper drainage purposes, or avoid slopes of 15% or greater, and then specified 15 height. So that was in what they adopted from the Planning Commission, but we don't seem to get as detailed. So we're kind of passing it off into the CUP is what I'm kind of.
What this set of amendments does is to set out goals and kind of approaches. And it really, even before that, in the comp plan revisions, it talks about, there's like several pages about upholding rural character. We talk about
maybe you can just clarify. So what Douglas County, what their
And-
commissioners
but this-
accepted, is that
Here,
kind of
let-
different than what we're doing right now?
I mean,
Are we
it's
doing a-
kind of going at the same thing.
Okay.
We say, we talk about this Midwestern approach of using basically already cleared land that's being used for agriculture instead of clearing. So we talk about, in general, solar facilities located within the Midwest are divided into groupings of photovoltaic panels that are placed in areas that were formerly used as the aforementioned pastures and fields while retaining the existing tree lines, stands of mature trees, and the like, and conforming to the existing topography in the area in a manner that requires a minimum of clearing and grading. And it goes on to say.
No, Kelly Ross, I understand that. If you read through Douglas County, they're very specific and put very hard lines or numbers or details about even specifying the height limit at exactly when the panels are at full tilt. And so that's why I was just kind of clarifying that if you read through what got passed, they definitely have some more specific detailed things out.
They do have a few specific things about grading that we don't have now.
Okay.
We do have panel height requirements, which you just mentioned.
I saw that.
Commissioner Rash, Jay Leipzig, I was also going to add that just kind of what Karen had alluded to. I think we really tried to promote in our comprehensive plan. We have stipulations that promote that rural character. So we're kind of going about similar things, but in a different way. If there are particular things that are site specific, I think the best place to address that would be through the actual stipulation, the conditional use permit.
Right. That's what I'm
That can
kind
be
of
noted.
leaning on, is that we're a little more general and then you're kind of
Right.
punting a lot of things to the CUP to pick up
Yeah,
on the
I
details.
think that's an easier way to
Okay.
approach it.
And we were careful in having requirements for submittals to make it clear what is going on so that our engineers can review that. And like you said, pick it up at the conditional use permit stage.
Okay, does everybody understand what these are? 8A, B?
There's one more. I think it's one more. Yeah. Clarification that the guaranteed funds associated with decommissioning and reclamation can be other forms of surety in addition to escrow. So our legal staff went through, and it was originally written just for escrow. And at the end, we said, oh, and by the way, you can do surety. But the way it was written, it just really didn't make sense. So our legal staff rewrote it to build in that idea that it's surety that's acceptable to the county that will be required. I'm sorry,
Okay.
Chairman.
All right.
I got one quick
Question? Sure.
Do you know on the surety and the escrow, are they estimating that out over the increases of the life of the CUP, or to make
Yeah.
sure that there's going to be?
Yes, it's required to be reviewed. It can be reviewed within a year, but it has to be reviewed at least every 5 years.
Anything else? Other question?
Mr. Chairman, this is Jay Leipzig. Can I make one more additional comment just to follow up on that? What Ms. Miller just said. It's become common practice too with many of these farms or these facilities are using a combination of both surety and escrow. So it's as over the life of it, it's better, and it's just one particular component of it. They're combining the two together. So that's really what we're trying to address here with this change.
Okay. Unless there is an objection or a question, I'm putting 8A, B, C, and D together and looking for a motion.
Roger Mason, I approve. I make a motion that we approve the recommended staff changes.
Dave Johns, I'll second him.
It has been moved and seconded, and if there are no objections or questions about that, then let's take the vote.
Terry Atwell,
Yes.
Michael-
They seem pretty common sense solutions.
Michael Levin,
Yes, I believe they're appropriate.
George Lund,
Yes, it is appropriate.
Dave Johns,
Yes, I agree with the recommendations.
Lindsay Grisay is absent. Mark Huggins is absent. Jim Neese,
Yes, it's appropriate.
Kelly Rast,
I'm a no because I'm not real comfortable with 8C. I wish the stormwater was a little bit more detailed out, but I will hope that everybody on the zoning boards will do their jobs.
Randy Downing,
Yes.
Randy Hutchins is absent. Chris Iliff is absent. Roger Mason,
Yes, the changes are appropriate.
we have 7 yes, 1 no.
Motion is approved. And if there are no further questions, we can move on.
This is Karen. Now it's time for step 3, circling back to the initial
Karen?
motion on the floor.
Karen, I apologize. This is Mike Levin. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to leave. I did not think we would go past 9 p.m. and I actually have to get somewhere. So I believe we'll still have a quorum though, but I do have to leave. So
Step 3, are you explaining that to us?
Yes, so the suggested final motion is that I move that the Planning Commission recommend to the Board of County Commissioners adoption of the May 10th amendments to the comprehensive plan and zoning regulations regarding the regulation of solar facilities as drafted by staff in response to the April 4th Board of County Commissioners directives, and to include the approved Johnson County Planning Commission amendments for the reasons indicated during discussion.
We need to make this a final motion. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, please.
Okay, we would like a motion.
Dave Johns, I'll move. You have to read the whole thing. I move that the Planning Commission recommend to the Board of County Commissioners adoptions of the May 10th amendments to the comprehensive plan and zoning regulations regarding the regulation of solar facilities as drafted by staff in response to the April 4th Board of County Commissioners directives, and to include the approved JCPC amendments for the reasons indicated during our discussion.
Is there a second?
Randy Downing, second.
Okay,
I just have a question. So
question.
so we're going to vote, but yet we aren't really seeing the final thing that's going to be written up to go up to the BOCC?
This is Peg Trent, Chief Counsel. Yeah, that is common that you will see the main motion. There may be several amendments like you've made. And so you're now adopting that main motion with all of those amendments. And so everything that you voted on tonight will be, the staff will go through now after reading through your motions to make those corrections. And that is common to do it.
Okay.
On Robert's Rules of Order, that is not out of the usual.
Okay.
Okay, I will call for the vote.
Terry Atwell,
Yes.
Michael Levin has left. George Lund,
Yes.
Dave Johns,
Yes.
Lindsay Grisay is absent. Mark Huggins is absent. Jim Neese,
Yes,
Kelly Rast,
Yes.
Randy Downing,
Yes.
Randy Hutchins is absent. Chris Iliff is absent. Roger Mason.
Yes.
We have 6 votes for yes.
Motion is approved.
I'm sorry, 7 votes yes.
7. All
Pardon.
right, correction, 7, yes. Motion is approved.
Just for clarification on the record, what was the vote again? I'm sorry, on the record?
7,
7.
yes.
With the amendments. Okay, thank you.
Item H, updates and other business.
Mr. Chairman, Jay Leipzig, the planning director. The only additional business I have is that these proposed amendments will be brought before the Board of County Commissioners at a special meeting of the board on June 6th, 2022 at 2:00 p.m. in the Embassy Suites in Olathe, Kansas, which is where we had the previous the public hearing in April. That address is 10401 South Ridgeview Road, Olathe, Kansas. I would also encourage the public just to check back with the solar webpage if there are any changes or updates on that.
Thank you. Any questions?
Dave Johns, question. Will we have a planning commission meeting on the 24th?
Commissioner, this is Jay Leipzig, the planning director. I'll leave it up to the discretion of this commission, but we don't have any additional pressing agenda items. The only thing I would like to discuss is we had talked about setting a date for the visioning session with the planning commission, but doing that in June. But we don't have to do that at the May 24th meeting.
Any further questions? Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Dave Johns, I'll motion to adjourn.
Moved and seconded. Who seconded? Okay. We are adjourned. Thank you.